Transmigrated to a civilian Senju Shinobi. Check. No system. Check. Realistic progression. Check. What else do you need? Hello everyone. Omni-sensei here with What If I Was Reborn in Naruto with MOKUTON, Part 1. If you enjoy this content, please smash the like button. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to check out the original story linked in the description. I hope you enjoy listening to it.
Uchiha. Itachi. Roshi studied the boy standing before him. Dressed in a dark blue short-sleeved shirt and shorts, he looked more like a child than a shinobi. 8 years old, still soft around the cheeks with traces of baby fat, but his eyes told a different story. They carried no warmth, no childish mischief. They were the eyes of someone who had already stepped into a world far harsher than his age allowed. Yes, Roshi-senpai, the boy answered quietly. Roshi had transmigrated to this body for half a month now. 14 years old, already a shinobi who had spilled blood for years in the war with Kumo. He had grown used to the idea of being a killer. But taking a child along on such work? That was something his mind still balked at. Even if that child was Uchiha Itachi. None of this showed on his face. He unrolled the mission scroll, ready to brief, when a sweet smell drifted into his nose. It was 9 in the morning. Sparrows hopped along the eaves, chirping in crisp tones. The air was fresh, the sunlight soft, and from a nearby shop came the unmistakable aroma of dango. Roshi's gaze slid toward the little sweet shop, where the owner was already busy preparing skewers for the day. Uchiha. Cough. Forget it. I'll just call you Itachi, Roshi muttered. Understood, senpai, came the same calm reply. Hungry? Roshi asked. That finally earned him a reaction. Itachi's eyes flicked up, surprise flashing briefly before he followed Roshi's gaze to the source. A dango shop. Roshi-senpai, the mission, the dango looks freshly made, Roshi interrupted, already angling toward the shop. Fresh things taste best. Besides, what I had this morning wasn't enough. A little more won't hurt. He said it half to himself, half as a decision. And as the mission leader, there was no point in Itachi arguing. So the boy followed. Inside, Roshi ordered 4 skewers of 3-colored dango and 2 cups of tea to balance the sweetness. The skewers arrived on small green plates, each dumpling glistening softly under the sunlight. Pink sakura, green matcha, and white plain rice, dusted with powdered sugar. The aroma was warm, sweet, inviting. Roshi rinsed his mouth with tea first. But when he set the cup down, his brows lifted. Only 2 skewers remained. Slowly, his gaze shifted across the table. There sat Uchiha Itachi, fair cheeks slightly puffed out, sugar dusting clinging to the corner of his lips. His calm, unreadable eyes were narrowed just faintly, the faintest flicker of contentment breaking through, like a cat savoring a stolen meal. Boss, 2 more skewers, Roshi said with a small chuckle, nudging the untouched plate toward the 8-year-old. A small blush appeared on Itachi's cheeks, but his fingers moved without restraint. Sunlight spilled through the window, scattering golden patterns across the table where the 2 sat. One a child destined for infamy, the other quietly watching, unable to suppress his smile. The dango was soft, sweet, and pleasantly chewy. A sip of tea afterward. Perfect. Roshi let out a quiet, satisfied sigh. Across from him, Itachi also lowered his cup, clearly content. With that small pause behind them, Roshi finally unrolled the mission scroll. This mission is to clear out a group of bandits. There are no portraits, only reports. They used to plunder along the border of the Land of Rivers. When the Land of Rivers sent soldiers after them, they slipped across the border into the Land of Fire. The daimyo's men gave chase, but the bandits fled again, this time into the Land of Rain. Both countries dropped the matter, and just when things seemed quiet, the same group reappeared on the border of the Land of Rivers. In the end, the Land of Rivers turned to Konoha for help. His tone was almost businesslike, but his eyes narrowed slightly as he read further. According to their intel, there are no shinobi among them. Even so, they've managed to repeatedly escape pursuit without a single casualty. Numbers are estimated between 15 and 20. Since no ninja are involved, this is a crank mission. But because of their size, the reward is 50,000 Ryo. He pushed the scroll across the table for Itachi to study. Although this is a temporary team-up, I'll state my abilities. I specialize in ninjutsu, both range and power. For this mission, combat won't be an issue. His words were clipped, but his thoughts drifted for a moment. The body he now inhabited once belonged to a border patrol shinobi. On his last patrol, that shinobi had encountered a large Kumogakure squad. 2 teammates had died, and only he had returned, barely alive, clutching vital intelligence. By the time his broken body reached Konoha, Roshi was no longer Roshi. He had awakened here, or perhaps taken over. He still didn't know. What he did know was that he carried both this boy's 14 years of memories and over 20 years from another life as an ordinary man in another world. But dwelling on it was pointless. After half a month of recovery, he had chosen this mission as a way to re-enter the world of shinobi, something simple enough for rehabilitation. Bandits were only civilians, after all. The real challenge was finding them. He had expected to go alone, but the village had assigned him a teammate. "Senpai, you don't need to worry about me," Itachi said, his voice serious and level. "I can use ninja tools, I have some grasp of genjutsu, and I can perform basic fire release. If you judge that I'll become a burden, you may abandon me at any time." Roshi's brow twitched upward. Such words, spoken from such a young mouth. His father had told him Roshi was an excellent shinobi. And though Itachi often disagreed with Fugaku on many matters in his mind, when it came to evaluating strength, he trusted his father's judgment. Although this is only a C-rank mission, the fact that they paired a Chunin with a Genin means Senpai's strength must be near the top of the Chunin class, without obvious weakness, Itachi added. Hearing such a measured, almost clinical assessment from an 8-year-old, Roshi couldn't help but arch an eyebrow. "Since you're that confident, you'll follow my command to the letter during this mission. No problem with that, right?" "Yes, Senpai," Itachi replied with a firm nod. "Good. Now, about the reward, you don't need to worry about my portion," Itachi interrupted, his tone still polite, even humble. "It's already an honor to learn from Senpai." Of course, Roshi knew the truth. To the Uchiha clan heir, 50,000 ryo was hardly worth notice. But principle was principle. He tapped the table lightly, his voice calm with no room for negotiation. "We're in this together, so don't say things like that. The reward will be split 60-40. As Chunin and team leader, I'll take the extra share. But you won't be shorted a single ryo. Is that clear?" "Yes, Senpai," Itachi murmured, his expression unreadable but his tone respectful. The land of rivers, in the terminology of Earth, was like a demilitarized zone in the shinobi world. It had a daimyo, a functioning bureaucracy, and even samurai who took care of the safety of the people and nobles. Yet it lacked one crucial thing: a hidden village. In a world ruled by chakra, that absence was no different from walking naked among wolves. Whenever threats grew beyond what the samurai could resolve, the Land of Rivers had no choice but to send requests to Konoha, Sunagakure, or even a Megakure, trading ryo for borrowed strength. This peculiar arrangement gave birth to border towns like Koizumi, strange, lively, and thriving despite the instability. There were no high walls, no gates, no checkpoint inspections, only a dirt road that ran through the town. Caravans from the Land of Wind brought spices, while hunters from the Land of Fire carried mountain delicacies. The town was bustling with people trading goods. In one of its humbler restaurants, Itachi sat before a steaming bowl of beef stew. Though his face remained calm, a trace of uncertainty flickered in his dark eyes. Their mission had been uneventful so far: smooth passage to the border, the official handover, a briefing on the bandits, and, by custom, the obligatory check with the local trading officials. "They're nothing but a rabble of filth," the chamber head had said earlier, stroking his neatly trimmed beard. The man was round-bellied, good-natured on the surface, but dismissive in tone. "They've plundered a few caravans, yes, but merely a minor inconvenience to trade." After that, he had buried them in pleasantries and empty well-wishes, his true meaning clear: deal with it quickly and don't trouble us again. Roshi had listened without any reaction, recording the information that matched word for word with the mission scroll. Then, without warning, he had shifted the topic. "Koizumi town draws goods from 3 countries," he remarked, voice casual. It must have everything, then. Of course, the portly man replied with an eager smile. I've heard the beef here has a unique flavor. Roshi continued, as if merely indulging idle curiosity. The man's eyes lit up, delighted to expound. Ninja-sama, you have fine taste. If you wish for authenticity, you must try Zeman's beef stew. It is the pride of our town. And just like that, Roshi had lost all interest in further conversation. He had offered polite farewells, then led them straight to Zeman's place. Now, in the quiet shop, the aroma of the famous stew drifted thickly around them. Itachi's gaze fell to his bowl. The broth shimmered beneath the steam. It had generous chunks of beef so tender they tore at the lightest touch of chopsticks. Reddish-brown meat with a thin coat of oil, topped with crisp green scallions. The fragrance was intoxicating, various spices and herbs blending with the deep richness of simmered beef. At last, Itachi spoke, his voice so low it was almost lost in the hiss of steam. Senpai, are we not going to complete the mission? The mission will get done, Roshi replied offhandedly, lifting a piece of beef to his mouth with steady hands. The moment the meat touched his tongue, the flavors bloomed, tender flesh melting with richness, layered with spice, and finished with a faint, grassy sweetness local to the land of rivers. His eyes half closed, a sigh of satisfaction almost slipping past his lips. For the first time since awakening in this unfamiliar world, the tension in his chest seemed to ease, soothed not by plans or strength, but by the simple perfection of a meal. Itachi picked up his chopsticks with quiet resignation and murmured, I'll dig in. Roshi's lips curved faintly. With an easy motion, he lifted his hand toward the counter. Boss, another serving, please. His eyes lingered on the lean shopkeeper, who was carefully polishing a ceramic pot. Genuine admiration flickered in Roshi's gaze. The control of the heat is remarkable, and the sauce, perfectly balanced. It doesn't smother the beef's natural flavor, it elevates it. Zeman, the cook and owner, immediately brightened. His weathered face lit with pride. Wiping his hands on a faded apron, he chuckled. Ah, sir, you truly have great taste. We use only the finest cuts, fresh from the stables each morning. Then we slow simmer for hours to bring out this flavor. Mastering the nuances takes as much effort as mastering a difficult ninjutsu. His eyes flicked knowingly to the leaf insignia on Roshi's forehead protector, choosing his words to resonate with a shinobi. Would you care to try our grilled beef? I still have 2 fine cuts left today, Zeman offered eagerly. That would be great, Roshi agreed without hesitation. A small charcoal grill was soon placed at their table. Zeman personally laid the marbled slices across the grate. This is short rib, rich in fat. And this is feather blade, very tender. Shall I handle the grilling for you? Please do, Roshi said with a polite nod, his eyes following the fat as it sizzled and dripped into the coals below, infusing the meat with a smoky flavor. Then, almost casually, he asked, I've heard there's been trouble around Koizumi lately. Bandits on the roads. Has your beef supply held steady? Zeman turned the meat with practiced ease, the fire crackling cheerfully. Bandits? Yes, he admitted. But most of their victims are new caravans, merchants unfamiliar with the routes. My suppliers are old farmers, families with decades of experience. They know every path, every contact. Business has gone on without much trouble, and caravans now travel in larger groups, rarely stopping along the way. It's become the safer method. Itachi's chopsticks stilled for the briefest moment. The trading official hadn't mentioned this crucial detail. The bandits weren't indiscriminate. They were selective. Please enjoy, Zeman said warmly, dividing the grilled beef onto their plates. Roshi enjoyed the meal thoroughly. By the time Roshi and Itachi stepped back into the street, the sun had already dipped low, dyeing the rooftops of Koizumi town with a warm orange glow. Merchants' shouts echoed faintly as caravans unloaded goods, while the breeze carried the mingled scents of grass from the nearby forest and lingering aromas from food stalls. The food had been excellent, worth every bite. The 750 Rio bill, though heavy, equaled several days' hard labor for an ordinary villager. But with a mission reward of 30,000 Rio, Roshi considered the expense a luxury well within reason. Senpai, Are we going to investigate the caravans that were attacked? Itachi asked as he caught up. No need, Roshi replied without breaking stride. His gaze was fixed on the horizon, where Shirakawa village's lanterns had begun to flicker. Tonight confirmed two things. First, those bandits deliberately avoided caravans with deep local ties. The trading official may have looked cooperative, but their concern was half-hearted, their information deliberately shallow. Second, those bandits once fled all the way into the land of rain, yet risked everything to return here, to the very borderlands hunting them. That kind of recklessness can only mean two things. He paused, eyes narrowing as he looked out across the darkening fields. Either they left something behind, something so important they'd rather risk death than abandon it. His gaze sharpened, settling on the familiar outline of Shirakawa. Or the simpler answer, they aren't outsiders at all. This is their home. They never left it behind. Shirakawa village, nestled along the trade route, lay quietly in the deepening night. Neat wooden fences encircled the settlement, and its heavy gate stood wide open. A handful of villagers lounged on stone stools near the entrance, chatting idly. At first, they hardly noticed them, but once their eyes fell upon the Konoha headbands and shinobi garb, their casual expressions shifted. The man in front quickly rose and bowed deeply. Ninja-sama, you grace our village. How may we be of service? Roshi's gaze swept across the group calmly. From within his tune-in flak jacket, he produced a scroll and unrolled it with deliberate slowness. Konoha Shinobi, he announced, with the weight of authority, dispatched under the order of the daimyo of the Land of Rivers. The villagers stiffened instantly. Eyes flickered between one another, and the leader stepped aside without another word. Itachi, standing silently at Roshi's side, noticed the change. Roshi's manner here was utterly different from the relaxed tone he had shown back in Koizumi Town's restaurant. Here, every word, every gesture radiated control. Matching his senpai's composure, Itachi remained quiet, sharp eyes observing everything. Where is the village chief? Roshi asked. He's at home, one villager stammered, hastily pointing the way. The two shinobi entered the village. Though night had only just fallen, Shirakawa was already lit with scattered lamps. The warm glow from paper windows outlined tidy homes, giving the place an air of carefully preserved comfort. At the village center, one building stood out, a grand inn in Japanese feudal style. Yet it looked eerily empty, a stark contrast to the lively lights flickering from the other homes. As they walked, Itachi felt hidden eyes peering from behind doors and windows. Outwardly calm and not showing any expression, he kept his senses sharp. Roshi, however, was unbothered, heading straight for the chief's home. An old man was there at the doorway, framed by the glow of a lantern. His back was slightly stooped, hair white with age, but he stepped forward quickly and bowed, ushering them inside with practiced respect. The house was plain but tidy. Once all were seated, the old man spoke in a careful tone, his calloused hands unconsciously twisting together. I am Shirakawa Kisuke, chief of the village. May I ask what matter brings you two here? Roshi leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing with the faintest trace of a humorless smile. I imagine you already have some suspicion. Bandits have been troubling the trade route nearby. Surely you're not unfamiliar with them. I. Kisuke's forehead glistened with sweat under the oil lamp. Officials have indeed inquired before, but I truly... Oh. Roshi's fingertip tapped the table, producing a crisp, deliberate sound that cut the air. Then I'll rephrase. Are all the registered villagers of Shirakawa present within the village? Kisuke began. Senpai. Itachi's clear, youthful voice interjected smoothly, shattering the silence. When we entered, I noticed several houses with windows unlit, as if no one lived there. For the briefest instant, the old man's shoulders tensed. He quickly forced a reply. Some families, left to make a living outside. Roshi's eyes drifted across the room, noting the sturdy, finely made furniture. Plain, but not poor. His tone remained even. From what I see, Shirakawa lives comfortably. In such stability, it seems unlikely many young people would abandon home to wander. Yes, Yes, Kisuke dabbed his brow with a sleeve, words tumbling over each other. But the trade road brings merchants and travelers. Young folks see the outside world, and their hearts grow restless. Those bandits must have become a problem for the village. Roshi said, his gaze sliding toward the empty invisible through the window. Such a fine inn, yet abandoned. The chief lowered his eyes, his voice heavy. Indeed. That is why I pray day and night for you honorable shinobi to rid the road of this scourge. Then, as if a shadow lifted, Roshi's pressure eased. His tone softened to something almost cordial. Then let us work together. Chief, do you have any clues you can share? Our aims are aligned. Even the smallest detail might prove valuable. Kisuke's hands tightened, his voice colored with helplessness. I'm just an old man. I truly know nothing, nothing that could aid you. Roshi's face betrayed nothing. He ran through a few routine questions about population and recent outsiders, then rose to leave. We'll lodge at the inn tonight. If you learn anything, inform us immediately. In the tatami room above the inn, the oil lamp glow kept flickering due to a light breeze. Itachi checked the doors and windows, confirmed the night was quiet, then turned to Roshi. Senpai, did you learn anything from the village chief? Roshi had returned to his gentler manner, seating himself on the mat with a faint, almost amused smile. What do you think, Itachi? The 8-year-old genin considered for a moment before answering confidently. You think the bandits are connected to this village, and that the village elders know more than they admit, possibly that they're even complicit. That's why you switched to the strict tone at the gate. It's a fair read, Roshi said, intrigued. But if you suspected that, why not act casual to gather information quietly? Why start stern? Itachi's brow furrowed. This had been his same question. Roshi explained, opening with a difficult posture is groundwork. Being too friendly can invite probing questions and let them cover tracks. By acting strict, we force a reaction. The villagers' heightened attention when we arrived, far beyond what merchants get, tells us something. A village with a fine inn and steady trade shouldn't stiffen at unfamiliar shinobi unless there are other reasons to worry. He paused, letting the point land. If I'd been gentle, a practiced chief would have deflected us cleanly. His reaction made clear the village can't fully separate itself from the youths who left, and the bandits' appearances. Itachi nodded. Those subtleties of social pressure and inference weren't taught at the academy. So what next, senpai? He asked. Roshi tilted his head and returned the question. If you were in command, what would you do? After thinking, Itachi replied, I would use genjutsu on the chief to extract more precise information, where the bandits might hide. Once we have a location, we can eliminate them. A sound tactical option, Roshi acknowledged, then steered the discussion forward. But suppose we use genjutsu, what outcomes should we prepare for? He raised a finger. 1. The chief truly doesn't know the core details, and the genjutsu gives little. 2. The bandits are concealed inside the village. 3. They're in the hills outside the village. The last two are messy, Roshi continued, sitting straighter. Without hard evidence and with no overt hostility, these bandits could appear to be ordinary neighbors, farmers at work from dawn till dusk. The mission brief said the land of rivers pursuers couldn't even identify them by appearance. That means if we uncover a location, what we find may be people who, to everyone here, look like family. He fixed Itachi with a look that weighed the moral calculus. If we strike without irrefutable proof, we risk sparking the villagers' wrath. People naturally shield those they know. They may obstruct, question, defend, anything could happen. Silence settled, broken only by the faint pop of the lamp wick. Itachi's face tightened into thought, the problem now clearly bigger than any simple takedown. This was about human loyalties, law, and how to act when facts are muddy. The halo of the oil lamp flickered in Itachi's eyes, yet no answer came to his lips. The Uchiha had a way of doing things. Genjutsu to control, force to suppress, and seize evidence later. Simple. Direct. Whether innocents were harmed or conflict escalated had never mattered. The weak did not deserve their explanation, and the strong would never ask for it. Such was the Uchiha's creed. Such was the cruel logic of the shinobi world. The mission system reflected this divide. Missions involving only civilians rarely rose above C rank, the rewards capped at 100,000 Ryo. But the moment shinobi entered the equation, the mission became B rank at minimum, rewards starting at 80,000, with no ceiling. Yet Itachi had never thought of this. Every time he thought of the arrogance etched into his clansman's bones, a quiet nausea stirred in him. He loathed the Uchiha's methods, and even more, the curse of power born from grief. To glorify strength bought with loss, to parade suffering as the Uchiha's pride, that suffocated him. The dark dragged him back to the memory he hated most, the day he awakened his Sharingan, staring at the bodies of his teammates. And his father's words, cold and approving, "You are indeed my son." In that instant, his heart had plunged into ice. I didn't become a ninja for the sake of these eyes. The thought had echoed inside him ever since, though he had never voiced it. Now, faced with Roshizenpai's question, the emotions he had buried began to swell. He lifted his gaze. In the shifting glow, the faint outline of the two tomo shimmered in his eyes. "Forgive me, senpai," his voice was low. "I don't have an answer." "Then," Roshi said simply, "we'll proceed my way." The following morning, before the mist disappeared, Roshi led Itachi down the stone pathway of Shirakawa. Cooking smoke rose lazily from the houses, but the tension in the air was thick. They went door to door. The villagers' guarded faces were like closed shutters. Even polite questions were met with vague replies, and more than one family, noting the shinobi were only boys, one 14, the other 8, shut their doors outright without pretense. Roshi's expression never wavered. He shifted the rhythm, beginning with harmless chatter, "The harvest looks good this year. The inn seems quieter than before." Small talk, nothing more, but each word pried, little by little, at the villagers' silence. Itachi stood by, watching everything sharply without uttering a single word. If Roshi was the hand that knocked, Itachi was the hawk that saw everything. Shifting gazes, hesitations in tone, the tightening of knuckles, he noted them all, recording each with a credibility mark in his small notebook. By sunset, the sky was filled with orange. They stood beneath an old tree at the village gate. Itachi opened his notebook and spoke in a voice that belied his age. 37 villagers are mostly away. 15 stay in regular contact. 6 more are sporadic, but with stable work elsewhere. Those accounts match. The remaining 16. His eyes narrowed. Their whereabouts are unclear. The villagers' claims are vague, often contradictory. Roshi gazed at the rooftops fading into the night. Not all of them are bandits. Some left for livelihood, some for adventure. But he smiled faintly. The chief's reaction last night told me enough. He knows. Itachi snapped the notebook shut. Another pattern. The number of traveling merchants dropped sharply after the bandit raids. The inn owner reported nearly 30% less income, and villagers complain of stockpiled goods. Trade has slowed. They're suffering for it. Roshi's lips curved into a knowing smile. If Shirakawa had been a barren village, only ruthless methods would have worked. But this place had tasted prosperity before. It had known the sweetness of trade routes. And for those who had once climbed high, even a fall halfway down was bitter enough to wound. Which meant the timing was perfect. Where force alone might fail, cooperation could be bought. So the two turned back toward the chief's house. This time, Roshi's presence was colder than the night before. Village Chief Shirakawa. Roshi laid the neatly organized investigation scroll on the table with deliberate slowness. His voice was steady, almost gentle. "Now, do you have anything you wish to tell me?" The old man's Adam's apple moved with effort. His withered fingers curled into the fabric of his robe as though clinging to it for strength. I not understand what you mean, sir." Roshi circled around the table, his footsteps unhurried, until he stood before the village chief. The last strands of sunset cut across the room, casting his shadow long and sharp on the floor. He leaned forward slightly, his gaze full of accusation. "Shirakawa Kisuke." His words dropped like bombs to the old man. "You know very well we could have chosen a much simpler, much harsher, solution." The air in the room thickened. Even breathing became a careful, stifled act for Kisuke. Every line recorded in this scroll represents the restraint and respect we've shown your village. Roshi's voice was calm, almost too calm. True, you can argue this isn't decisive evidence. But evidence is rarely what decides matters. People believe what they want to believe. And if I were to submit this report to the Land of Rivers, letting word spread that Shirakawa not only breeds bandits but also shelters them, what do you think would happen? Ninja-sama. Panic cracked through the old man's voice as he lifted his clouded eyes, desperation flashing within. Please, please, I beg of you, do not. Our village would never. Yesterday, Roshi interrupted, straightening with composed ease. I already made things clear. Our goals can align. We want the mission completed, the trade route secured, the threat removed. You want peace, the return of the caravans, your warehouses cleared of unsold goods. He adjusted the cuff of his sleeve, his eyes drifting toward the deepening night outside the window. As for minor details, such as where these bandits truly came from, that lies far beyond the scope of a C-rank mission. My time is limited, village chief. If you insist on wasting goodwill. The unfinished words lingered in the silence, heavier than any threat. Roshi lifted a hand, almost kindly, and patted the old man's trembling shoulder before turning away. At your age, you should know better than to protect the wrong people, Village Chief Shirakawa. Sliding open the paper door, he let in the evening wind, carrying with it the mingled scents of grass, smoke, and simmering meals. Let's go, Itachi. There's nothing worth eating here. Tonight, we'll dine in Koizumi town. Yes, senpai. Itachi's quiet reply followed. He cast one last glance at the village chief, frozen in place, his back bent further under invisible weight, aged another 10 years in a single moment. The sound of wooden sandals echoed on the stone path, fading step by step until the village road swallowed them whole. Alone in the dim room, Shirakawa Kisuke slowly closed his eyes. Only the faint crackle of the oil lamp's flame remained, devouring what little warmth was left. Roshi and Itachi's silhouettes receded along the trade road. From the shadows, one watchful gaze finally withdrew. A figure darted back toward the village, while several others slinked after Roshi's departing shadow clone, trailing it toward Koizumi town. Beneath the broad shadow of a tree was Roshi with Itachi at his side. They watched in silence as the pursuers vanished into the distance. Itachi's eyes lingered, dark and unreadable, until the last hint of movement dissolved into the night. Inside the village chief's residence, the oil lamp burned brighter than usual, casting restless light across the room. Several of the village's elders had gathered, their faces drawn tight, the air so heavy with unease it was suffocating. I told you from the start we should have reported this. A hoarse, angry voice broke the silence. The speaker's hands trembled with contained fury. When those boys crept back in, I knew it would end like this. At first, no one in the village had known what their youths were doing after leaving home. But when news spread of bandits being hunted in the Land of Rivers, at the same time a dozen young men from Shirakawa went missing, the pieces began to align. And when those missing youths reappeared, so too did the raids. It didn't take much for the village elders to connect the dots to an ugly truth. Opposite the speaker, a middle-aged man adjusted his round-rimmed spectacles, the lamplight glinting coldly off the glass. When the pursuit team questioned us, we swore ignorance. And now you want us to change our story? What will the authorities think? His tone was soft, but every word cut clear. Life is hard, yes, but still manageable. If the outside world learns Shirakawa harbors bandits, the village will collapse. Easy for you to say. A scar-faced brute slammed a calloused palm on the low table, rattling the teacups. His bloodshot eyes burned. Your warehouse is bare. Mine still holds half a year's grain, and it's rotting by the day. If this keeps up, the whole village will starve. From the head seat, Kisuke spoke at last. His dry voice rasped as though it had been wrung from the depths of his chest. Those two ninja already know. The room froze. Silence deepened like a pit. Bang. Shirakawa Sasuke, an elder with a hawk's gaze and a manet of white hair, struck the table, sending water sloshing from the cups. His voice bore the weight of command, sharp and heavy. Kisuke, We can't waver any longer. Those aren't peddlers, they're ninja on a mission. His skeletal fingers clenched the table edge. Where are they now? Kisuke's lips quivered. I sent word to Kachiro to have them followed. His voice faltered. His gnarled hands twisted the fabric of his robe. That child, he was only led astray by outsiders. He was a good boy once. Enough, the scar-faced man barked, voice grinding like stone. Kachiro's hands are soaked in blood. He's no child anymore. Chief, if you protect him now, you'll doom us all. Sasuke rose slowly. His hunched frame stretched into a looming shadow that swallowed Kisuke beneath the lamplight. His voice was cold. This is no longer about a few outsiders dying. Once ninjas are involved, there must be resolution. We can't hand them over, the man with glasses murmured after a long silence, his words taut as a drawn bowstring. And we cannot, must not, let the world know Shirakawa's sons became bandits. Then what do you propose? The scar-faced elder snarled, eyes flashing with animal ferocity. Sasuke closed his eyes, the deep lines of his face cut deeper by the flame's trembling glow. Since the warring clans era ended, this trade road has been our lifeline. Only in recent years have we lived decent lives. If Shirakawa's name is stained, the caravans will vanish, and every household here will fall with them. His eyes reopened, resolve burning in them. Our reputation is survival itself. Kisuke, you must cooperate. Brother, but, no buts. The old chief's faint protests were devoured by the hiss of the lamp's wick until only heavy, suffocating sighs remained. Moments later, when the watcher outside confirmed the ninjas had indeed left Shirakawa's borders, the tension in the room snapped like a bowstring. No more words were spoken. The elders dispersed swiftly, their shadows slipping into the night, carrying with them the village's secrets. Soon after, on the outskirts, more than 40 young men gathered beneath the cold moonlight. In their hands were no longer hoes and rakes, but weapons that glinted sharply, sickles honed to razors, pitchforks sharpened into spears. Faces once familiar and warm were now drawn tight, their expressions shadowed by resolve. At the head stood Sasuke, with Kisuke beside him. Behind them, several villagers carried heavy loads of wine and meat. No words were spoken, only ragged breathing and the soft clink of iron filled the night air. This was no era of peace. Barely 50 years had passed since the end of the warring clans era, when not only ninja but farmers and hunters alike had been dragged into bloodshed. Sasuke was one of the few who had crawled out alive from that mountain of corpses. He still remembered how to lead men to slaughter. Under his command, the line of villagers wound into the forest like a silent serpent, gliding toward the mountains. Did you foresee this, senpai? Itachi's childlike voice broke the stillness from the trees above the road. His dark eyes reflected the moving column below. Leaning against the trunk, Roshi shook his head slowly. The shadows carved hard lines across his face. I considered many possibilities. They might confess and beg us to keep their secret. One of them could tip us off out of conscience. Or perhaps they'd collapse into infighting. His gaze followed the cold gleam of sickles below. But this? I didn't anticipate this. Those blades were held by people he'd once greeted with casual warmth. For the sake of their reputation, for their livelihoods, they've chosen to bloody their own hands. An uneasy weight tightened in his chest. Were the villagers reckless fools? Or had he been the fool, blind to the truth of this world? It is also the correct choice, Itachi said, his voice steady, far too calm for a boy of 8. His eyes remained fixed on the column of villagers. By destroying the rot with their own hands, they make atonement. And they preserve the village's foundation. Roshi turned, studying the boy's profile, the face still soft with youth, yet the eyes already saw more cruelty than him. Perhaps it was true. His own understanding of this world was far too naive. He turned away again, gaze sinking into the jagged ridges of the mountain, their outlines cut sharp by moonlight. Halfway up, hidden in a natural hollow cave, lay the bandits' refuge, a crude stockade of wooden fences, its entrance guarded by only 2 men beside a bonfire. When they saw Kisuke leading a small group up the mountain path, their faces lit with familiar ease. Chief, you came all the way yourself? and with so many gifts. One of them stepped forward, smiling brightly. Koichiro. His face was full of vigor, still boyishly handsome. He reached to take the carrying pole from Kisuke's shoulders, as though welcoming an elder relative. Kisuke froze, his steps suddenly heavy. Under the flickering firelight, his smile twisted stiffly across a face creased by age and fatigue. Koichiro. Down in the village, people are investigating again. It's a commotion. You truly don't plan to leave and lay low? Oh, Chief, we already promised you. Koichiro waved dismissively, a cocky grin tugging at his lips. We're careful. We only rob foreign snakes. Never the traders who deal with Shirakawa. Those greedy merchants deserve to be bled dry. You can rest easy. His eyes flicked to the bundles, where jars of wine and slabs of meat peeked through. His grin widened, boyish delight sparkling across his face. You even brought so many good things for us. Wait, I'll call Brother Shinmi. He was just grumbling the wine wasn't strong enough. Kisuke's facial muscles twitched uncontrollably. That outsider. That smooth-tongued parasite who had fed Koichiro dreams of an easy life. Shinmi. The man who had twisted a hard-working, sensible boy into this reckless bandit. Grief, rage, and despair crashed over Kisuke, threatening to break his frail body. Because he knew, here, under this merciless moon, what had begun could no longer be undone. Deep within the stronghold, Shinmi sat on a smooth stone. At first glance, he seemed utterly ordinary, average height, plain coarse clothes, a face that would vanish in a crowd. Yet when his eyes met Kisuke's, a fleeting glimmer betrayed the danger lurking beneath the surface. The Daimyo's palace has sent men again, Kisuke said, his voice dry, gaze fixed on Shinmi. You all had better go into hiding. Koichiro and several young men muttered in protest, defiant. What's there to be afraid of? But Shinmi, to everyone's surprise, simply nodded, his manner sincere. You're right. We should hide. He even bowed slightly. The tightness in Kisuke's shoulders eased the faintest bit. It's not easy out there. Tonight, eat and drink your fill before you go. He gestured for the men behind him to set down their burdens. Much appreciated. Shinmi's smile deepened, faint lines creasing the corners of his eyes. Koichiro, tell everyone. Eat well, rest, and we'll leave at dawn. The cave quickly filled with noise and cheers. Though many grumbled at the thought of fleeing again, Shinmi's words soothed them easily. During the feast, Kisuke and his men were unusually warm, urging the bandits to drink more, eat more, over and over reminding them to be cautious on the road. After several rounds, Koichiro's and the others' faces flushed red, their eyes hazy and unfocused. Shinmi drank nearly 3 mugs too, yet his gaze remained sharp, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. Kisuke watched him, heart sinking. Something cold coiled beneath that smile. Night deepened. The moon hung in the treetops. Only when the cave echoed with the steady rise and fall of snores did Kisuke slowly stand. He waved toward the shadows. A faint rustle came from the trees. Led by Sasuke, villagers emerged from the dark, farm tools honed into weapons clenched in their fists. Some faces wavered with hesitation, until the first scream tore the silence apart. After that, expressions hardened, and numb determination took its place. They chose this path themselves, Sasuke said. His voice wasn't loud, but it pierced through everyone's minds. Robbing merchant caravans, dragging our village into the fire. His sharp gaze swept the crowd. Think of your empty rice jars. Think of the unsold goods in your homes. Sasuke's words cut through the chaos. When the small caravans are gone, do you think they'll stop? No, they'll turn on the very merchants who trade with us. Once people taste easy profit, they never turn back. This is their retribution for trusting an outsider's poison. His last words hissed through clenched teeth. Under moonlight, dark red dripped from sickles and pitchforks, spattering the mud. Sasuke strode to Shinmi's body, driving a pitchfork through it several times before straightening. Gather your things. He didn't spare Kisuke, pale and trembling, even a glance. There wasn't much wealth in the stronghold. Sasuke divided the meager loot among those who fought, bundling the rest. These, along with. His hand pointed at the corpses littering the ground. Take them to report, Kisuke. Tell those ninja this is all that's left. Say the rest was squandered by the bandits long ago. Yes, yes. Kisuke's voice shook violently. This matter ends here. Sasuke's eyes cut across each villager like a blade. No one speaks of it again. The story is simple. The bandits were wiped out by Konoha's ninja. Only when every head bobbed stiffly did he look away. The Shirakawa villagers, burdened with their pitiful spoils of war, vanished into the darkness before dawn, leaving behind silence and the stench of blood. When the horizon began to pale, a corpse twitched. Shinmi slowly sat up, brushing dried blood from his clothes. He gazed east, lips curving in a playful smile. I meant to keep them a while longer. He muttered with mockery in his tone. Now it's less trouble. His eyes swept over the villagers' bodies, once so loyal to him. His smile widened. At last, I can live peacefully in the land of tea. You're a ninja, hey? The cold, clear voice shattered the silence. Shinmi froze, snapping his head up. A young man stood atop a nearby rock, dark green attire blending with the dawn shadows, forehead protector glinting faintly. He descended lightly, as if carried on the wind. Shinmi's pupils shrank. He stepped back, muscles coiled tight, eyes fixed on the symbol gleaming on the stranger's brow, Konoha. A band of ordinary villagers, able to slip past the land of rivers into the land of fire, and even into the land of rain. There's no doubt someone's guiding them. Rosh's voice was calm, but his eyes gleamed like probing needles. Shinmi's throat bobbed, but his tone stayed steady. A gang of petty thieves. Nothing more. At best, a C-rank mission. Fewer than 20 of them. The land of rivers wouldn't pay more than 50,000 ryo. His gaze lingered on Rosh's hands, wary of forming seals. This sum, Shinmi continued, subtly steadying his breathing, isn't worth 2 shinobi risking their lives. I didn't act directly, and my name's not on the land of rivers wanted list. If you report truthfully and let me go, the mission still counts as complete. He spread his hands, a gesture of harmlessness. Why gamble with your lives for pocket change? A shinobi battle is far too unpredictable. Rosh's fingers brushed his tool pouch. You seem to know the situation well. Kept the scale small, just enough to avoid raising the bounty high enough to spark a shinobi conflict. A faint smile tugged at Shinmi's lips. The corpses at your feet will be proof enough for your report. In theory, yes. Roshi inclined his head. But the Land of Rivers posted the request to Konoha, Tsunaga-cure, and a mega-cure. To calculate so precisely. Tsunaga-cure's work? Or perhaps a mega-cure? His gaze narrowed. So careful. I'd say you're... Before the words finished, one of the corpses behind Roshi burst upright with a violent crack, splinters of wood flying. A cold, humanoid puppet emerged, joints grinding as its jaw clattered open. Dozens of senbon, glowing faintly blue, shot forth. Roshi spun with lightning reflexes, countering instantly, but Shinmi's hands blurred the moment his focus shifted. His wide sleeve snapped open like a viper's hood, and nearly 100 poisoned needles fanned into the air. At the same time, Shinmi's chest swelled, the surrounding air sucked inward, wind release, great breakthrough. A roaring gale exploded from his mouth, sweeping the cloud of senbon into a deadly storm. The wind drove the projectiles with terrifying speed and force, weaving a whistling net of death across Rosh's back. Puff, puff, puff. The sickening rhythm of metal punching into flesh echoed like rain striking leaves. Roshi convulsed, blood coming out in countless tiny bursts across his body. Eyes, cheeks, neck, chest, limbs. The venom spread in dark veins from every wound. He staggered, then collapsed face first into the mud, still. Shirakawa village lay obscured in the mist. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of earth and leaves, undercut by a faint metallic tang. At the gate, Itachi stood silently, watching the villagers come in with small bundles on their backs. Their faces carried no grief, only exhaustion and a hollow numbness. Kisuke walked last, his steps faltering as though each one might bring him to collapse. The sight of Itachi was like a stone dropped into stagnant water. The line of villagers froze, all eyes shifting to the small shinobi standing before them. Sasuke pushed forward, his bark-like face hardened by years. "Ninja-sama of Konoha," the elder rasped. "The bandits have been cleared. There isn't much left, just this." He pointed to the bundles. "The village head will explain." Itachi's gaze swept over them. Farm tools, rough clothes, all smeared with dark stains. His eyes returned to Sasuke. "Roshi-senpai asked me to deliver his message." Silence fell so deep that even breath seemed to still. "First, Konoha knows everything that happened in the cave last night." The words struck like ice water. Several villagers swayed unsteadily. Kisuke's head jerked up, horror etched in his face. Sasuke's expression darkened, the veins on his cane hand bulging. "Second," Itachi continued, voice flat, "outwardly you'll give one story only. The bandits were tracked and destroyed by Roshi and myself, Uchiha Itachi. The villagers of Shirakoa merely provided assistance." He paused, locking eyes with the elder. "Third, cleansing your own house is your internal matter. Konoha will neither judge nor interfere. On the condition that it ends here. No further incidents. No harm to trade routes." Sasuke's chest heaved, his gaze burning into the boy before him. After a long silence, he ground out a single word, "Understood." His voice rasped like sandpaper. Itachi gave a small nod. He spoke no further, simply turned, and melted back into the fading mist. His small silhouette vanished toward the mountains. Only when he was gone did whispers erupt. Fear, unease, dread curling like mist around the villagers. Sasuke slammed his cane down, voice cracking like a whip. "Enough. Do exactly as the ninja-sama commanded. Finish cleaning up, get to your work. And remember, if any man, woman, or child speaks one word of today's events." His bloodshot eyes swept over them, the unspoken threat freezing their tongues. Not even a graveyard could have been quieter. Kisuke glanced at Sasuke, lips trembling, but no words came. His back hunched lower, as if crushed under the weight of it all. As soon as Shinmi used the wind-release jutsu, the ground under his feet gave way. A hand covered in dirt shot up from the ground and grabbed his ankle like an iron vice. Damn it! As a strong force pulled him down, his pupils got smaller. The ground swallowed him up like a living thing, leaving only his head above the surface. He couldn't believe his eyes when the Roshi that was full of poisoned senbon turned into a puff of white smoke and disappeared into the morning air. Earth release, headhunter jutsu, and a shadow clone. Jonin. Shinmi writhed and screamed, but the mud got tighter around him. Then pain shot through his stomach, sharp and unending. Ua! His face twisted in pain. Wooden spikes had gone through his organs and were growing violently from the inside. Veins were full of invasive roots that spread through his blood and stabbed into his flesh with every heartbeat. More branches grew from the wounds, tearing him apart from the inside. Cough. Blood sprayed from his mouth and dripped onto the ground. Crimson flowed from his nose, ears, and eyes, soaking his chin before splattering the ground. Puppets. Senbon that has been poisoned. You're from Suna. Hey. Roshi came into view, standing over him. His eyes were steady and unreadable. So, a rogue ninja. He bent down a little and spoke in a flat, clear voice. The villagers only found a small part of the loot, didn't they? Where did you hide the rest? Not on you. He squinted. Do you have anything else to say? A reason for defecting? It would make the report better. His voice stayed calm, as if he were bored. If not, I'll just make one up. Shinmi's eyes bulged, and bloodshot veins spread out like spiderwebs across them as the wood tore him apart from the inside. He opened his mouth, but all that came out was bloody foam. A broken, rasping voice came out of his throat. Too tired. Can't see hope. Every year, sandstorms get worse. Missions growing fewer. The daimyo is cutting the military budget again. War, an endless, thankless war. But still, weak, ordinary merchants had safer, better lives than shinobi who fought for their countries. Why? Why did the strong work hard, suffer, and die while the weak lived in peace? He couldn't take it. During the Third Great Ninja War, he ran away and stayed hidden until Anbu confirmed his death. He built carefully by hiring men, finding weak spots, and hoarding money. All to get freedom. All to one day be able to retire in peace. The plan had gone perfectly. He would get rid of the idiot followers when the time came. He would silence the villagers if needed. He could still see a villa in the land of tea. The roof is red and the walls are white. Camellias in the wind from the sea. Warm sunlight waking me up every day. Now, everything fell apart. His breath was short and rough. His blurry vision focused on Roshi, who stood out against the pale morning light like a black shadow. A flash of kunai. Shinmi's head fell to the ground. Roshi took a sealing scroll out of his chest, unrolled it, and put the head on top of it. His hands moved through the seals. The light sparkled, and the head disappeared, leaving behind a pattern of fading seals. Protocol. If you come across a foreign rogue shinobi, you must seal their head and send it back. Intelligence could look through it for information. There might be a bonus. At the very least, a regular bounty. Footsteps echoed at the gate as the light faded. Itachi came out, his young face calm. Done. Yeah. Roshi got up and brushed off his hands. As you told me to, I finished talking with Kisuke and the elders. I made it clear, Konoha will not talk about what happened here. You and I officially killed all of the bandits. He took out a small bag out of cloth. They turned over valuables as compensation. I accepted them on your behalf. Roshi tucked the pouch away. Good. Sweep the stronghold. See if this Tsunagakure rogue left anything worth taking. He looked at the bodies that were lying around on the ground. Leave the cleanup to the villagers. At first, the bodies were meant to show that the mission had been successful for the Land of Rivers. That was no longer needed. It was more than enough to have the head of a rogue nin from Tsunagakure. Konoha's intelligence division would figure out that he was the one behind it all, and there was no doubt that the mission was a success. What started out as a simple C-rank task had turned into something much worse than anyone could have imagined: the death of a rogue shinobi. Itachi walked toward the broken puppet parts that were lying around, being careful not to get too close to the main body. His hands moved quickly through seals to call forth a shadow clone. The clone moved slowly, reaching out with one finger to touch the wooden frame. As soon as it touched the wood, it shimmered a little and turned into a bluish-purple stain. Toxic. Not strong enough to get rid of the clone completely, but still dangerous. Itachi pushed his clone forward, which made it move faster. It carefully opened the puppet's chest and took out a sealed scroll that was hidden inside. The scroll was clean. Itachi still had the clone unroll it and check for traps before letting his real body get closer. He only looked at it with his own hands when he was sure it was safe. Itachi said quietly, "Senpai, it's a sealing scroll. Type that uses a blood seal." Roshi's eyes sparkled with knowledge. Then the rest of the loot should be inside. He didn't know how to unseal such seals. They would have to wait until they got back to the village. He took out a small, specialized tube and carefully sealed it after taking a sample of Shinmi's blood. Blood was the key. Chakra was a fusion of physical and spiritual energy. Once refined, traces of it remained in a shinobi's very cells. That's why blood could be used as a summoning medium, or, in this case, to break the blood seals created by its owner. So long as the blood still retained vitality, a sealing expert could unlock it. Roshi put the scroll in his tool pouch and then swept the stockade one last time. He dusted off his hands and turned to the boy next to him, a rare, easy smile spreading across his face. That's pretty much it. The mission is over. The only thing left to do is file the report. Itachi stood quietly, still as a statue. Roshi blinked, then snapped his fingers as if remembering something. "Oh, right. Before we head back, want to stop by Koizumi Town. Or visit." The 8-year-old tilted his head to the side and squinted his eyes in confusion. Roshi smiled and patted Itachi lightly on the shoulder. "The mission is over," he said. "Can't just go home without relaxing a little." Itachi said, "Yes, senpai, in a calm voice. Roshi crouched down until their eyes were level, and his voice was strong but soft. This isn't a command. So don't give me a soldier's answer. Please just let me know if you want to go. The boy didn't say anything. The morning wind moved the air, bringing with it the smell of blood and the smell of grass and dirt. His eyes moved past the broken fence and followed the faint outline of the trade route that wound down the mountain. Dango? He finally asked, almost in a whisper. Roshi smiled even more. Great idea. He got up and stretched slowly as the first rays of sunlight hit the edge of his shadow. Then let's go to Koizumi town and try their dango. And while we're at it, we'll also bring back some local foods. The dango in Koizumi town couldn't hold a candle to Konoha's. Its texture was coarse, and the sweetness clung unpleasantly to the tongue. Roshi grimaced, finally giving in and ordering a bowl of ramen to rinse the taste away. The ramen, at least, was worth the detour. Though not as legendary as Ichiraku's, the broth was hearty thanks to the fertile pastures nearby, and the meat practically melted in his mouth. Only the noodles disappointed, lacking that springy bite. Itachi, nibbling on his skewered dango, listened in silence as Roshi critiqued every detail. He didn't need ramen to mask the sweetness. While Roshi ate with gusto, Itachi's brush moved steadily over parchment, his small hand recording the mission report. Their agreement was clear. Roshi carried the mission's execution, and the split was 60-40 in his favor. Writing the report was Itachi's share of the work. Not that he minded. Even without the arrangement, shirking responsibility wasn't in his nature. But Roshi wasn't like the others. Itachi couldn't quite define it. He didn't even have a clear concept of laid back yet, but his senpai radiated something different from the typical shinobi mold. Senpai. HM. Roshi looked up from his bowl, a strand of broth glistening at the corner of his mouth. What is a ninja, to you? A job. The answer came as naturally as breathing. Itachi blinked. He had heard so many grand definitions: the blade of the village, the heir to a will, the foundation of peace. But never something so blunt. I like to eat, to enjoy life, Roshi said, slurping another mouthful. Being a ninja just pays the bills. That's all. And you, Itachi? Me. The boy froze. For him, there had never been a choice. His path had been set from birth. At 4, he had stood on the battlefield beside his father. At 6, he had graduated from the academy. As the Uchiha clan's prodigy, he had never once asked why. A ninja is just a profession, Roshi continued, setting down his chopsticks. His tone sharpened. Strip that away. What are you? An Uchiha genius? A weapon molded by the village? What is it that you want? Itachi stared into the steam rising from his tea, the question sinking deep. You don't need an answer yet, Roshi added more gently. One day, you'll find it. Just remember, ninja may sound heavy, but at the end of the day, it's just one role among countless others. Roshi suddenly grinned. Want some ramen? No, thank you, senpai. Itachi shook his head, hair brushing against his cheek. It's really good. Better than those sticky dumplings. You can't fill your stomach with sugar alone. I still prefer not to, Itachi replied steadily, though the faintest tremor laced his voice. Trust me, Roshi said with mock gravity. Sweet things always taste better with something savory on the side. Senpai. Itachi's gaze lifted, uncharacteristically firm. Sweet dango is enough, with clear tea. It was the first time he had directly contradicted Roshi. The older ninja sighed theatrically, regret written on his face, yet his lips curved in quiet satisfaction. To his surprise, a tiny smile ghosted across Itachi's own face, fragile and fleeting, like the first crack in frozen ice. The Land of Rivers wasted no time confirming the bandits' extermination, broadcasting the news far and wide. Roshi and Itachi returned to Konoha soon after. Submitting the mission report at the Hokage building was routine. The real work lay in delivering the rogue Sunagakure ninja's head to intelligence. The reward would depend on what could be extracted. If Shinmi's information proved useful, perhaps an extra 150,000 ryo. If not, closer to 100,000. As for Shinmi's sealing scroll, since recovering stolen goods wasn't part of the Land of Rivers commission, the spoils naturally belonged to Konoha. Roshi left it with the village's sealing experts, confident it would yield something valuable. Of course, said Torii, the Chunin overseeing registration at the Hokage building, nodding briskly. If the items within the scroll contain secrets tied to other villages, Konoha will keep a portion for storage or research and provide compensation equal to its worth. Given that, the village won't charge an additional fee for the unsealing. Thank you for your trouble. How long will it take? Return in 3 days. By then, the intelligence division should have finished combing through the head. With the formalities concluded, dusk was already settling in. Itachi parted ways with Roshi. On missions, living rough was routine, but once back in the village, he was still just an 8-year-old child. Dinner at home awaited him. Roshi lingered, watching Itachi's small frame vanish around the street corner before turning his steps westward, toward the outskirts. His destination was an old mansion, standing for more than 50 years, spared during the Ninetales assault 3 years ago only because it lay far from the village center. Cherry blossoms flanked both sides of the estate, their nearly spent petals drifting in the wind. A few alighted briefly on Roshi's shoulders before slipping away in silence. I'm home, Grandma Momoka. In the courtyard sat an elderly woman in a deep brown kimono, her silver-white hair carefully combed. At his voice, she didn't look up, only inclined her head slightly. Your body. No problems. None. I can control this power now. Roshi lifted his palm. Emerald light unfurled in his hand, coaxing a sprout that grew rapidly before their eyes. Once, Roshi had been beyond saving, his body collapsing despite Konoha's finest medical nin. It was Grandma Momoka who had taken him from the hospital, gambling on a forbidden hope, Hashirama's cells. The worst outcome, she had thought, was death. In the twilight of her 70s, she had carried out that crude procedure herself here in this old mansion, injecting the cells, binding them with a suppressive jutsu, and leaving the rest to fate. Roshi's body still remembered. The sensation of a dam bursting, power flooding uncontrollably. Cells like ravenous beasts, clawing through his flesh, devouring him alive. Roots splitting organs apart, branches threatening to tear through skin. Thousands of red-hot needles stabbing every inch of flesh, bones grinding and reshaping, blood seething in his veins. It had been pain beyond the limits of language. Even now, the memory left a dull ache deep inside him. That Uchiha, the so-called genius. What do you make of him? Grandma Momoka's tone was flat, almost casual. Just a child. Roshi closed his hand, extinguishing the green light and the sprout along with it. His answer was calm, unflinching. Her lips twitched, an almost invisible ripple, like wind skimming water, and then she fell silent. Only the hush of falling blossoms stirred the courtyard. At length, she rose, her movements dignified yet faintly frail with age. If your body holds steady. Her gaze swept past Roshi, settling on the drifting petals. Her eyes seemed to pierce beyond the present, into the dust of time itself. Then live well, Roshi. A breeze passed, scattering withered blossoms. Her voice deepened, steeped in long-buried fatigue and sorrow. Our clan has given too much to Konoha. She paused, eyes still on the ground carpeted with fading petals. Her words were almost a sigh, yet carried the gravity of years. We gave up our lives. We gave up our hatred. And in the end, we couldn't even keep our ancestor's name. Lord Hashirama, Lord Tobirama. For the village, what remains of us? Her whispers trailed off, thinning into the twilight. They dissolved into the silence of the courtyard, leaving behind only the rustle of blossoms, soft, melancholy reminders of a glory long gone, and a decay quietly taking its place. More than 54 years had passed since Konoha's founding. The Uchiha, Hyuga, Sarutobi, and the Aino, Shika, Cho clans, countless clans with secret arts, still kept their traditions and pride alive. Only the Senju were different. The name survived mostly as rumor, a memory carried by those who remembered Tsunade wandering the lands. The Senju were not destroyed so much as they chose to dissolve themselves, by Hashirama's will. Senju Momoka remembered that moonless night as if it were carved into her bones. The air had been so heavy it felt like blood could be wrung from it. Candlelight threw monstrous, trembling shadows across the tatami. The whole room felt like a threshold between life and some other, bleached world. Hashirama sat in the main seat. The familiar kindness in him was gone, replaced by a silence that pressed against the ribs. He still smelled faintly of blood and dust, but deeper than that was a weary sorrow, as if some part of his soul had been burned away. Momoka knew why. He had just ended Madara. Friend, rival, the apocalypse folded closed by his own hand. Tobirama stood to one side, silver hair catching the dim light like cold steel, his eyes sharp as knives. The night wind whispered through the crack of the door, the candle flame guttered, and shadows flickered like uneasy thoughts. After my elder brother steps down, I will take the mantle, Tobirama spoke into the hush, calm but unflinching. Madara is dead. We cannot avoid this. Yet the danger that follows is subtle. His gaze swept the assembly, finally finding Hashirama, then returned to the room with hard lines sharpening his words. What difference will others see between a Konoha with the Senju perpetually at the head and the old Senju clan itself? They will call Konoha the Senju village. That suspicion will coil around our foundation like a poison vine. Other clans will lose heart. Their will to build a shared future will rot away. The candle flared, casting Hashirama's profile in alternating light and shadow. He lifted his head slowly. The eyes that had once been as green as a forest now seemed sifted with ash, emptied by a wildfire. What Tobirama says is true, Hashirama said hoarsely. Each word seemed to cut and scar. I killed Madara. For the village. When ideologies clash, even the deepest friendship and the greatest power can only end in ruin. Pain threaded his voice, a grief that had strangled his closest friend, yet that very suffering had forged something else in him, a resolution as cold and inexorable as iron. We created this village to end the endless slaughter between clans, to make sure children would not grow up in oceans of corpses like we did. This place must not remain the property of one clan. It must belong to everyone. It must carry everyone's dreams. That is the path I have chosen. He drew a steady breath. For the purity of this village, so Konoha will not be seen as the Senju's private holding, so no suspicion can rot its root, so every clan can truly call it home, Hashirama's gaze fixed on Momoka. For the village, friends, brothers, and even my own flesh and blood, if they threaten its future, may be sacrificed. The words fell like a tide of ice. Momoka felt an almost physical presence press through the room, not violence, but the absolute, unbending authority of a man who had paid the highest price and found the price still not enough. Resistance before such will was not merely foolish, it was inconceivable. Hashirama spoke with the quiet finality of decision. He had chosen the village system as the only viable future, and he would accept whatever it required, including the fading of his clan's name from prominence. Tobirama continued without pause. Therefore, we will dissolve the clan. His voice was methodical, clinical. This generation may keep the name, but the next will not. He unrolled a thick scroll with deliberate care and read the terms aloud. Those who choose to leave the clan and adopt a new name will receive compensation from the clan's assets. Money, secret jutsu scrolls, land, tools, everything will be distributed under detailed regulations. Enough resources will be provided so any departing member can secure a livelihood and pursue personal development far beyond what the clan system could have afforded them. The decree hung in the candlelit room, a formal unraveling of legacy, a promise of provision, and the end of a chapter written in blood and sacrifice. The candlelight wavered, throwing shifting shadows across the room and painting the conflicted faces of those gathered. Shock and anger had come first, but slowly, calculation replaced it. To abandon the proud name of Senju? It cut to the bone. Yet Hashirama's words carried a weight no one could deny. And then there was the compensation. Scrolls of secret techniques once guarded with bloodshed, wealth that entire generations had sacrificed for, now offered freely. On top of that, with both Hashirama and Tobirama holding the mantle of Hokage in succession, who would dare lay a hand on those who shed their clan name? The reality was inescapable. Without a unified will or a leader bold enough to resist, faced with immense benefits, the shelter of future Hokage, and Hashirama's immovable conviction forged in blood and war, the will to fight dissolved like snow beneath the sun. The younger members, especially, betrayed flickers of yearning in their eyes, longing to break free from the suffocating weight of tradition and taste a life unbound. Momoka's gaze drifted between the two brothers as the low hoot of an owl echoed through the night, like a requiem for the clan's end. The Senju chose the village over the clan, the dream of tomorrow over the glory of yesterday. To erase suspicion of a Senju Konoha. To win genuine trust from the other clans. To let the idea of the village sink its roots into soil watered by sacrifice. To achieve this, they willingly dismantled the banner that had once shone with unmatched glory. Momoka bowed deeply. Resistance was not only useless, it was unwise. The age of clans had ended. In the era of the villages, shedding the Senju name might grant ordinary members more freedom, more chances, more life. Hashirama truly believed in this system. He had even cut down Madara for it. And so, the Senju would not be diminished by losing their name, for the Hokage was Senju Hashirama, and after him Senju Tobirama. Techniques and resources once won by blood could now be acquired with ease. From one angle, it was an easier, safer, more prosperous path. The future Hashirama had envisioned for them within the great family of Konoha. Thus the proud Senju clan faded like a tide, merging into Konoha's streets. Some chose new surnames, scattering like seeds through the village. Others clung to their last shred of pride, keeping the Senju name but living quietly. Momoka belonged to the latter, as did Roshi's ancestors. Yet whether they changed their names or not, all blended into the background of Konoha, as countless had before them. The Senju brothers allowed it in silence, leaving the clan's old residence in the hands of those last guardians, a faint consolation for history lost. Now, only Momoka and Roshi lived there permanently. With time, their kin drifted away into assigned apartments or bustling districts, returning only during New Year or festivals, brief visits to remember old glory and share news. Roshi's father had grown up on Senju stories and stayed in the house even after starting his own family. But when both his parents fell in battle, it was Momoka who raised 9-year-old Roshi. She watched him graduate from the academy at 11, nearly die at 14 on the Kumogakure front, and then be dragged back from the edge of death by the power of Hashirama's cells. Now, Roshi sat silently at her side, studying her profile as her thoughts wandered deep into memory. Only when she returned from that distant haze and gently motioned him away did he quietly rise, excusing himself and retreating to his room. The next morning, the sun rose over the village. Grandma Momoka, always an early riser, had already laid out breakfast: glistening white rice, pan-fried sori crisped to perfection, moon-shaped slices of pickled radish, and a steaming bowl of soup. With no missions assigned, Roshi stretched in the grove beside the house, mind already turning toward the training plan he needed to forge. He knew the script of this world. Akatsuki, Madara, the God Tree, Otsutsuki. Each name hung over him like a blade suspended by a single thread. Even though Roshi had a love for life's simple pleasures, he understood one truth. In this world, strength wasn't a luxury, it was survival. The shinobi's path to power had always been clear: temper the body, squeeze out potential, hone taijutsu, refine skills, master ninja tools, adapt to all change, study ninjutsu, expand one's methods, bend to the environment. Among these, ninjutsu brought the fastest results, but the foundation always lay in the body. Tempering the body was forging physical energy, and every time he pushed past pain, his will sharpened. Physical strength and mental fortitude fed into one another, nurturing chakra until both reached the peak of his natural limit. Only then was a shinobi ready to pour himself fully into ninjutsu. In truth, aside from chakra and the staggering potential hidden within the 130 trillion cells of this world's humans, the logic of growth wasn't so different from Earth. As a descendant of the Senju, Roshi already possessed greater chakra reserves and a sturdier foundation than most. Now, with the perfect fusion of Hashirama's cells, his ceiling soared far above ordinary shinobi. But even that was not enough. Koga-level strength might match the Akatsuki, but beyond them loomed a calamity that only those at the Sage of Six Paths level could endure. There were only two known roads to such heights: the Otsutsuki system and the Sage Art system. The Otsutsuki, the very source of chakra, were a race of starborn marauders who devoured life force, converting it into power. The Senju, Uchiha, Uzumaki, and Hyuga all bore traces of their bloodline, strengthening themselves through chakra. The Uchiha path, as shown in the original tale, was clear: fuse hashirama cells, gain powerful yang chakra, blend it with their own yin, awaken the Rinnegan, seize the Ten Tails, and ascend to an Otsutsuki-like state. The Senju's method was never made explicit. Perhaps it required a sharingan, or something equally impossible to grasp. But Roshi noted a crucial detail often overlooked. Madara, who awakened the Rinnegan, was the reincarnation of Indra, son of Hagoromo Otsutsuki. Hashirama was the reincarnation of Asura, Indra's brother. Both carried fragments of Hagoromo's power, once the Ten Tails Jinchuriki. That meant the Rinnegan's awakening required not just the fusion of yin and yang, but also an inherited spark from the Ten Tails itself. For Roshi, that path was still shrouded in mist. For now, he set it aside. The Sage Art system, on the other hand, offered something closer, yet still daunting. Its peak was below the Otsutsuki, but far above the limits of ordinary shinobi. The strongest known sage was Hagoromo himself, with Hashirama standing just beneath him, a living god of his era. The first step was the hardest, developing the ability to feel natural energy itself. From there, one had to absorb it, balance it with physical and spiritual energy, and refine it into sage chakra. For most, the obstacle was ignorance. They had to first believe in natural energy before they could sense it. Roshi, however, had no such blind spot. He knew it existed. And natural energy was everywhere. He even suspected it was the reason humans in this world were stronger than Earth's, why giant beasts walked freely. The land itself had been steeped in that power for generations. He had already tried once, when first adjusting to his body, but his attempts to sense it ended in nothing. This time, however, he would not fail. Upon returning from the mission, Roshi re-evaluated his path forward. There were two well-known sage regions in the shinobi world: Mount Myaboku's Toad Sage Arts and Ryuchi Cave's Snake Sage Arts. The Toad method was patient and progressive. Disciples coated themselves in the sacred toad oil to awaken sensitivity to natural energy. Those who succeeded bore the toad-like eye markings and shadows of sage mode. The snake method, by contrast, was brutal. The white snake sage forced natural energy directly into the body. Survive, and you succeed. Fail, and you die. Different approaches, same essence, forcing the practitioner into direct contact with raw, untamed natural energy. But Roshi wondered, were there other ways? Yes. The God Tree. The Otsutsuki planted it to drain planets dry, siphoning natural energy into a chakra fruit. One such tree had already risen in this world, its fruit harvested once before. If it could digest natural energy, then perhaps its echoes lingered still. And then there was wood release. Hashirama Senju's secret art could suppress even-tailed beasts, absorbing chakra at its root. Roshi hypothesized that Hashirama, through his bloodline and Asura's chakra, had instinctively mirrored the god tree's nature itself. If so, then Roshi's path wasn't simply to master wood release jutsu. It was to pierce its core, to draw out the true essence of that bloodline power. Wood release, verdant growth jutsu. His voice was low, steady. The ground trembled. From the soil, a tender sapling pushed upward, unfurling at a visible rate. Sunlight caught on its young bark, and leaves whispered as they stretched wide. When the tree reached shoulder height, Roshi deliberately slowed his chakra flow, keeping only the faintest thread of connection. "Keep growing," he murmured. He extended his senses, weaving invisible threads of perception into the sapling's spiritual core. The tree responded with startling vitality. Roots stabbed deep into the earth, spreading like a predator hunting prey. The soil swelled and churned. More unsettling were the branches. Tender twigs hardened in the light, twisting unnaturally. They swayed, then froze, every one of them aimed directly at him. The craving hit him like a wave. The tree was hungry, a raw, primal thirst for chakra. A sharp sting raced across his skin. Sweat slid down his temple. "Calm down," he whispered, hands flashing into the snake seal. The branches halted an inch from his face, writhing with frustration. Roshi pushed, redirecting the tree's focus, guiding, urging it toward that unseen current, toward natural energy. And then, it shifted. Fury softened into confusion, and confusion gave way to something else. The sapling caught it. That elusive, omnipresent force Roshi himself had failed to sense now pulsed faintly through its being. Just as hope surged within him, the change came. The tree shot upward again, trunk groaning, branches stretching, and then twisting into grotesque forms. Bark blackened with flowing, unnatural patterns. Roshi stepped back instinctively. From the roots upward, a pallid gray spread like wildfire. Death in purest form. Wherever the color passed, life vanished. Bark, leaves, even the trembling tips of branches, all fossilized in moments. In 3 heartbeats, the living sapling became a flawless stone sculpture. Roshi stood frozen, chest heaving, forehead slick with sweat. He had failed. And this failure had been perilously close to killing him. Would release constructs, even supported by his chakra, were fragile. They lacked the foundation to endure raw natural energy. Against its flood, they collapsed like sandcastles before the tide. And yet, amidst ruin, there was discovery. At the very instant the wood release brushed against natural energy, the air itself had rippled, small, subtle waves, like a pebble cast into still water. That ripple was everything. For the first time, Roshi, who could not naturally perceive natural energy, had brushed against its aura, faint, fleeting, but real. In the quiet of the forest, he closed his eyes. Replay the ripple. Memorize it. Feel it again. This was the beginning. Days later, when they crossed paths in the quiet corridor of the Hokage building, Itachi's gaze lingered on Roshi. "Your complexion isn't very good, senpai," he said softly, eyes noting the faint shadows beneath Roshi's eyes. "Yeah, training." Roshi rubbed his temples, barely stifling a yawn. "The money's in. Let's head to Yakiniku Q. We can eat and split it there." Itachi, already used to Roshi's ways, had told his mother beforehand and followed without hesitation. The pair slipped into the evening bustle, the streets alive with chatter and the warm glow of lanterns. The smell of grilled meat wafted from nearby stalls. Roshi hummed an off-key tune as he walked ahead, Itachi trailing half a step behind. For Itachi, there was something oddly soothing in these moments. Around Roshi, there were no probing eyes dissecting him as a genius, no suffocating weight of expectation, just the simple feeling of being an ordinary kid. The barbecue shop was overflowing with energy. Pork belly hit the grill with a sharp sizzle, fat dripping onto hot coals, sending up sparks. Roshi snatched a slice as its edges charred to golden crispness, dunked it in dark sauce, and popped it into his mouth without hesitation. The hot juices burst across his tongue, mingling with savory richness. For a moment, the exhaustion of days of training melted away in that taste. "Who?" He exhaled with satisfaction, eyes narrowing in pleasure. Then, without thinking, he dropped another perfectly grilled slice onto Itachi's plate. "Eat more, you're still growing. Are you working on a new ninjutsu, senpai?" Itachi asked, glancing at the steaming meat before him. "Something like that. But it's not going too well," Roshi admitted vaguely, picking up another piece for himself. "What about you? What have you been practicing?" "Taijutsu, ninjutsu, shuriken training." Itachi lifted his chopsticks. "With a senpai from the clan. Uchiha Shisui." Itachi's chopsticks paused almost imperceptibly. His dark eyes flicked up to Roshi. "You know Shisui. Besides you, the fastest graduate in a generation. His name is the most prominent in the Uchiha," Roshi replied calmly, sipping his barley tea. "I've heard of him, though we've never met." Several rounds of meat later, the gnawing emptiness in their stomachs was replaced by warmth and satisfaction. Roshi dabbed his mouth with a napkin and leaned forward. The rewards confirmed. That Sand Shinobi scroll contained about 10 million ryo. The number hung heavy in the air. For an ordinary chunin, that sum was more than a lifetime's earnings. "Senpai," Itachi set down his chopsticks, eyes clear and steady. "Why did that sand ninja betray his village?" Roshi didn't answer immediately. Instead, he countered, "What do you think a village is?" Itachi considered carefully before giving the academy answer. "A place where shinobi live, take missions, and protect each other." Roshi nodded, though his gaze shifted to the city lights beyond the window. At first, Konoha was nothing more than a settlement, born when Senju and Uchiha set aside their blood feud. When the two strongest clans in the world clasped hands, side by side. He tapped the table lightly with his chopsticks. The other families in the Land of Fire had no choice. No clan could stand alone against such an alliance. For survival, they had to join Konoha. Itachi straightened unconsciously, listening intently. The glorious history he'd heard in the academy now sounded stripped bare. Through Roshi's calm words, the founding of Konoha wasn't a tale of ideals. It was survival, driven by power and necessity. When most of the Land of Fire's clans gathered under one banner, Roshi continued, the village naturally became the nation's strongest military force. Even the daimyo's court couldn't play shinobi against each other as easily as during the Warring Clans era. A thick cut of meat dripped fat onto the coals, sizzling loudly, smoke curling upward. So, at its beginning, Roshi's gaze returned to Itachi. The village was a platform. A way for clans to work together under rules that offered protection and competition. Back then, Konoha was nothing more than a fragile alliance, a dozen families huddled together against the cold. His eyes sharpened. Until the Senju clan voluntarily disbanded. Until the village began drawing in orphans, wanderers, and shinobi without clan ties. And when the second Hokage founded the ANBU. He paused, weighing his words. That's when the village gained power of its own. Power no longer tied entirely to the clans. Power that belonged only to the village. Outside the private room, the footsteps of a server carrying a tray faded into the distance, leaving a brief silence in their wake. This transition was crucial. Roshi's voice dropped, steady and deliberate. The village was no longer just a gathering of clans. Once the pressure of survival eased, suppressed desires began to surface. Individual pursuits, hidden beneath the collective, emerged, and some of those. He lifted his teacup, gazing at the amber liquid inside. We're bound to clash with the village as a whole. The rising smoke from the grill curled between them, half hiding their faces. Senpai, you once said being a shinobi is just a job, Itachi pressed quietly. Then, how do you view rogue ninja? Roshi's expression did not waver. Under normal circumstances, enemies. Because within the system of the hidden villages, shinobi are restrained. They cannot casually slaughter civilians. He dipped a piece of charred meat into the sauce, the oil shimmering under the light. That restraint allows farmers to till their fields, merchants to run shops, families to live their lives. It keeps violence contained, lets economies grow, and makes simple pleasures like this, he gestured at the table full of food and the sizzling grill, possible. As for rogue ninja, like that one from Suna. Roshi's tone hardened. He left his village for what he thought was a better life. On the surface, it sounds harmless. But in truth, a dry chuckle escaped him, the smile not reaching his eyes. That was just a cautious tune-in, too wary of the village's strength to go wild. But if we faced someone without restraint, who trampled human lives without a second thought? He paused, taking a sip of tea. His Adam's apple rose and fell as he swallowed. I only want to eat in peace, he said evenly, setting the cup down with a crisp tap. If anyone insists on ruining that, then, within my limits, I will stop them. Itachi listened without a word, his small fingers absently tracing the rim of his teacup, feeling the faint ridges of the ceramic. Senpai, he finally spoke, voice softer still, do you think the village system can maintain this order forever? Roshi's gaze shifted toward the window. Outside, dusk had settled. The streets of Konoha glowed under lantern light, shadows of families and shopkeepers moving across the roads. No system is perfect, Itachi, he said at last. What matters is whether it creates something better than what came before. And the hidden village system. He drew his eyes back to the boy across from him. It ended the Warring Clans era. It stopped clans from tearing each other apart without end. In that sense, it is better. Roshi tapped his chopsticks against the table, slow and deliberate. The village gave shinobi something new, a sense of belonging, a place they could call home. But with that came new restrictions. and new contradictions. Every system carries contradictions. Some can't ever be erased. A shinobi's personal ambitions will always clash with the village's needs. Clan traditions will always rub against the village's unified will. These conflicts can't be avoided. They can only be balanced, generation after generation. Then, "Senpai," Itachi asked cautiously, "does that mean a powerful clan should not exist within the village?" "Not exactly." Roshi shook his head. The village still needs clans. Especially those with unique bloodline limits. Families like that are the most effective way to protect and pass down those powers. He reached for lettuce leaf, wrapping it around a piece of grilled meat. In fact, clans lighten the village's burden. They nurture special talents, safeguard secret techniques, and act as buffers. Without them, gifted shinobi might come into sharper conflict with the village's rules. His voice dropped, calm yet firm. But a clan's power must never grow greater than the village's. Never above it. Because... He glanced at the glowing coals, at the hiss of fat dripping into fire. In the mountains of corpses and seas of blood of the last 3 wars, it wasn't only the great clans who carried the village. Many of its saviors were nameless shinobi, born without any bloodline or legacy. It was their sacrifices, the countless, ordinary lives, that allowed Konoha to stand and endure. Itachi lowered his head. On his plate lay the slice of grilled meat Roshi had placed there earlier. Now cooled, its sheen dulled under the warm yellow light. In the silence that followed, only the faint crackle of burning charcoal filled the private room, blending with distant laughter and chatter from beyond the walls. "Thank you for the food, senpai. I'll take my leave now." Itachi declined to share in Shinmi's ill-gotten gains. He calmly stated that he had not contributed to the matter, nor had he been part of the initial agreement for remuneration. He accepted only the 20,000 ryo stipulated by the mission. In turn, Roshi quietly settled the bill. As dusk deepened, Roshi rubbed his aching shoulders, preparing to resume his training. Just as he turned a corner, a figure in an animal mask appeared soundlessly, cloaked in shadows. "Hokage-sama requests your presence." The Anbu's voice was flat, devoid of emotion. Roshi scratched his head helplessly and glanced up at the crimson evening sky. The feeling was all too familiar, like being called in for overtime in his previous life. With a weary sigh, he followed the silent escort, his figure soon swallowed by the night. Inside the Hokage's office, the final rays of the setting sun spilled across the room, gilding it in warm gold. Hiruzen Sarutobi stood with his back to the door, the hem of his robe stirring gently in the breeze. Hearing footsteps, he turned slowly. Smoke curled lazily from his pipe, rising into the beam of light. This mission was carried out well. "You've worked hard," the third Hokage said, his voice gentle, though his seasoned eyes remained piercing. He tapped the pipe lightly, scattering a few ashes onto the tray. "Hokage-sama, you flatter me." "No, it's the truth." Hiruzen's tone softened, but then shifted. "When you were on border duty before, you didn't display such talent." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Roshi, what do you think of that boy, Itachi? His talent is exceptional, far beyond his peers. That child has lost his comrades, as have you." The Hokage's voice grew heavier. "Since you work well together, why not continue? As for the missing member of the squad, I'll arrange a suitable candidate." Roshi frowned. "With my qualifications, I'm afraid I'm not yet suited to be an instructor." By Konoha's tradition, such a team arrangement left only 2 options. Either he would lead as captain with 2 genin under him, or else a chunin, or even a jonin, would be transferred in, and the squad's missions would immediately escalate to B rank or higher. "This is Itachi's own request," Hiruzen explained, his gaze shifting toward the twilight outside. "He no longer wishes to be paired with genin." The sentence trailed off, but Roshi understood. After witnessing his comrades' deaths, the young Uchiha no longer wanted to experience that pain. "If you're unwilling, I won't press the matter." The third exhaled a smoke ring, fingers tapping softly against the desk. "It's not fair to involve genin in high-level missions. Nor would it be responsible for you." The office fell into silence, broken only by the faint crackle of burning tobacco. Then, With a sudden movement, the Hokage stood, his robe sweeping across the floor. Still. His expression softened, his tone earnest. I hope you'll think it over. If you refuse, there are Uchiha willing to take him on missions. But if possible, I'd rather their children not limit themselves solely to the clan. A flicker of complexity passed through his eyes. Roshi asked cautiously, and his father? What is the Uchiha clan stance? Fugaku will not object, Hiruzen replied evenly. In that case, Roshi inclined his head, I have no objections either. The Hokage's expression eased, a rare smile tugging at the corners of his lips. As expected. Roshi, how is Lady Momoko's health? Very good, Roshi answered simply. Hiruzen nodded, then pulled an old file from a drawer. Roshi caught a glimpse. It was his own record. Without a word, the Hokage uncapped his pen and wrote on it before Roshi's eyes. For the time being, you won't need to accept new missions, he said. Use this period to prepare for your promotion to Jonin. Jonin. Roshi's eyes widened in genuine surprise. The word carried weight. Jonin were the backbone of Konoha, the true core of its strength, second only to the Hokage. Each one possessed the qualifications, at least in theory, to contend for that very seat. It was not a title granted lightly, and its numbers were always kept few. Throughout Konoha's history, only a handful had ever risen to the rank of Jonin while still in their teens: Kakashi Hatake, Might Guy, and, in the years to come, Hyuga Neji. Such promotions demanded not only extraordinary talent and the strength to match, but were often tied to unusual circumstances or bitter sacrifices. Kakashi's father, the White Fang, had died under mysterious circumstances. Maito Dai gave his life to save his son, crippling the 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist in the process, and Hyuga Hisashi willingly surrendered himself to prevent a war. Konoha's promotions, then, were not always decided by merit alone, but sometimes as gestures of recompense or appeasement. Just special Jonin, Hiruzen said at last, breaking Roshi's thoughts. Roshi let out a quiet breath of relief. Special Jonin stood in a class of their own. Unlike full Jonin, they were not promoted for all-round excellence, but for mastering a particular field or possessing talents too valuable to ignore: keen sensory perception, unrivaled medical ninjutsu, or advanced sealing techniques. Their authority was lower than that of standard Jonin but higher than Chunin, often tasked with specialized missions or serving as expert advisors. This arrangement also spared him the political wrangling a direct Jonin promotion might stir. Understood, Roshi replied evenly. In truth, special Jonin suited him better: greater mission authority and higher pay, with fewer administrative chains tying him down. It was, in many ways, ideal. The third Hokage slid the file back into the drawer with a muted scrape. Someone will inform you of the promotion process. You'll need 2 letters of recommendation from active Chunin or Jonin, and you'll have to pass an assessment in your area of specialty. His eyes lingered on Roshi, carrying a silent weight. With your ability, I doubt it will pose a problem. As for the recommendation letters, Roshi understood immediately. His parents had fallen on the battlefield. His Jonin instructor had died during the Ninetales attack. His comrades from border duty had perished against Kumoga Cure. The most obvious candidates to vouch for him were all gone. If necessary, Hiruzen would arrange replacements, but Roshi preferred to rely on his own strength. I'll handle it myself, Roshi said firmly. Grandma Momoka could likely contact some of the Senju who had gone into seclusion. Though many had changed their names and blended quietly into Konoha's fabric, they had once been the village's core strength. He had seen them at family gatherings during festivals. Several of them still held the rank of Chunin or Jonin. Securing their recommendations should not be difficult. Hiruzen gave a small nod. Very well. Prepare yourself. As for Itachi's team, once it is complete, the Anbu will notify you. Yes. Roshi bowed, then turned and took his leave. By the time he stepped out of the Hokage building, night had already claimed the village. Lanterns flickered along the streets, casting warm halos across the cobblestones. A cool evening breeze brushed against his face, carrying with it the faint traces of tobacco smoke from the Hokage's office. Promotion to Special Jonin. The title itself meant little to him. But the freedom, access to higher-level missions, and more generous pay, those were things he could use. And for now, that was enough. The courtyard of the Senju old residence was steeped in twilight. The evening breeze stirred the ancient tree, its leaves whispering like faint sighs. Lanterns beneath the eaves glowed softly, scattering warm halos across the worn veranda. Grandma Momoka sat unmoving, as solid as stone. When Roshi slid open the door, her half-lidded eyes rose just enough to acknowledge him. "You're back." Her voice was flat, almost indifferent. Yet her weathered gaze lingered on him for a heartbeat longer than habit demanded. "Yes, Grandma," Roshi replied, settling onto the veranda with practiced ease. "The third Hokage summoned me. It was about squad assignments, and my promotion to Special Jonin." He left out the details about Itachi. There was no reason to burden her with the full truth. The way Hiruzen had paired them, then dangled promotion immediately after, it reeked of negotiation. No, not even negotiation. Exchange. At that word, the fingers holding Momoka's teacup faltered almost imperceptibly. She said nothing, her gaze drifting toward the shadowed corners of the courtyard. "I'll need recommendation letters from 2 active Chunin or Jonin," Roshi continued, his tone as formal as an official report. "Plus a special ability assessment. For the letters, I'll have to trouble you." Recommendation letters. Momoka finally turned her head. The words seemed to still the air beneath the eaves. She lifted her cup and sipped, though the scalding tea could not mask the flicker of meaning in her eyes. Those people. In Roshi's tangled memories, they were like distant, estranged relatives. Every year, they came at set times, quiet visits to this half-forgotten residence. Their offerings were never lavish, yet always proper. A box of fine pastries, fresh seasonal fruits, or a rare trinket from beyond the village. The recollections blurred at the edges. Some faces wore the weight of nostalgia, speaking to Grandma Momoka with unfeigned respect. Their eyes turned to him, young Roshi, with a complexity he hadn't understood then, as if he were a living token of the past carried into the future. They would pat his head or shoulder, ask about his studies at the academy, remark that he had grown taller. Their words were gentle, warm even, but always held a certain distance. For the Roshi of today, those ties were paper-thin. Strangers who appeared only on festivals could hardly be called family. Yet now, in need of recommendation letters, he could only rely on Momoka, the matriarch who still bound them together. From an adult's perspective, it was the most sensible, even necessary path. Better for her, an elder, to reach out than for a 14-year-old boy to beg favor from vague uncles and aunts whose names he barely remembered. Momoka set down her cup. Porcelain met saucer with a soft, deliberate click. Her gaze lingered on his youthful face. 14 years old, already old enough, in the shinobi world, to shoulder blood and war. And yet, to her, he was still unbearably young. A recommendation letter was no simple formality. It was a declaration of stance. When a parent wrote one, it meant they recognized the child as heir to their name. When a Chunin wrote one, it meant they were willing to accept that shinobi's authority. When a Jonin wrote one, it meant true acknowledgement, that they deemed this person a comrade worthy of standing beside them. To ask those people for such letters meant more than simple signatures. It meant bringing Roshi into their circle. Should he be pulled into that water now? After Lord Hashirama and Lord Tobirama's deaths, they had gathered here often, seeking to preserve a connection that could serve them in times of need. But behind that connection lurked expectations, burdens, and calculations. And for Roshi, still standing at the threshold of his path, those waters ran far too deep. About the recommendation letters. Momoka finally relented, her voice calm yet firm. "I will handle them." "Do I need to prepare anything?" Roshi asked. "You just focus on the assessment." With a casual motion, Momoka slid a ceramic cup of steaming tea across the table toward him. "Everything else is not your concern, at least not yet." Roshi accepted the cup, warmth seeping into his palm. "Yes, Grandma." He responded without hesitation. If the elder was willing to take personal charge, there was no reason for him to worry. "The recommendation letters will be delivered directly to the Hokage's office," she added offhandedly. Roshi's gaze lingered on the cup in his hands as his mind began to drift. The body's original owner had possessed a remarkable foundation, capable of wielding all 5 elemental ninjutsu, backed by an extraordinary well of chakra. Abundant chakra meant not only endurance but also physical strength, and his taijutsu reflected that. As for genjutsu, Senju Momoka, his guardian, had once stood as a famed genjutsu master in the turbulent warring clans era, even matching wits against the Uchiha. Under her tutelage, Roshi might not have mastered illusions to perfection, but neither was it a weakness. Now, however, both the quantity and quality of his chakra had advanced to an entirely new level. His perception sharpened day by day. His senses grew keener with each passing week. The special Jonin assessment? For him, it was less a trial and more an exercise in restraint, showing the precision expected of a Jonin without revealing just how much he had truly grown. Passing was never the question. The real challenge lay in controlling how much strength to display, enough to succeed without arousing suspicion. What weighed more heavily on his mind was the training of being able to sense natural energy. Through patient training these past weeks, he had begun to faintly sense the strange ripples in the air whenever his would release attempted to draw in natural energy. The sensation was fragile, elusive, but real. Though he had not yet learned to actively absorb it, the very feedback proved he was on the right path. All he needed was persistence. At the same time, the deeper potential of wood release demanded exploration. His earlier attempt to channel wood release with natural energy had ended in petrification, a failure, but even failure carried lessons. His trees had been too fragile, their foundations lacking. Should he first focus on strengthening their resilience, or experiment with diversifying their forms? The questions piled up, but the answer was clear. He had to understand wood release at its core, unravel the bond it shared with natural energy. Senju Hashirama's path lay before him, but Roshi needed to carve out his own. Only power, true, undeniable power, could secure his place in the shifting era he knew was coming. The assessment was nothing more than a passing ripple. What mattered was the strength he continued to forge. Outside, night deepened. The glow of lantern light softened the old residence, shadows brushing against the window frames. Momoka's eyes lingered on the boy before her, still clutching the teacup, gazed distant as if lost in another world. Seeing him so intent, so absorbed in his own thoughts, the stern lines on her face eased. She lifted her own cup, the tea long cooled, and took a slow sip in silence. The air inside the Hokuto's office felt thick enough to ring out. Dim light filtered through the window, cutting across the tobacco haze in fractured beams. The drifting smoke blurred Hiruzen's features, turning the third Hokuto into a shadowed figure behind the veil. Danzo's voice broke the silence, low, steady, and heavy, like a stone sinking into still water. Hiruzen, that injury report, plain as day. A wound that deep, blood loss, organ rupture. By all rights, no one should have survived. His finger tapped the hospital report on the desk. Each dull rap of his knuckles against the parchment drove his words deeper. Hiruzen did not answer. The ember in his pipe flared and dimmed, the only light in his silence. They both knew. That report described a certain death, a one-way path to the memorial stone. Yet Roshi still walked beneath the sun. Like the smoke between them, the unspoken truth lingered, dense, unyielding, impossible to ignore. Most of the Senju clan's jutsu rested in the Forbidden Archive, entrusted by Tobirama Senju himself. The clan might have developed new techniques before its decline, but what had truly allowed Roshi to cheat death was not hard to imagine. The risk must have been so great that even Momoka only dared act at the last moment. Hiruzen drew in a long breath from his pipe, the pungent smoke burning down into his lungs. He exhaled slowly, studying Danzo through the haze. "What are you trying to say?" His tone was calm, unreadable. His unfit to lead Itachi Uchiha. Danzo cut straight to the heart, his words sharp as a blade. "Give Itachi to me." His intent was bare, impossible to mistake. Roshi was nothing but a convenient excuse. Danzo's true prey had always been the Uchiha prodigy. Hiruzen's eyes hardened. Impossible. The word fell like a hammer, final and unbending. Even if Itachi were to undergo special training, he would never be delivered into Root's hands. Fugaku would never allow it. And with good reason. Root's members bore cursed seals, life and death bound to Danzo's will. To entrust the Uchiha clan head's son, their brightest hope, to that cage of shadows? Even ordinary clansmen recoiled at Root's name. Fugaku doesn't need to know. Danzo's confidence was chilling, his tone disturbingly casual, as if bending wills were second nature. I have ways to make Itachi join willingly. The sharp tap of Hiruzen's pipe against the desk cracked the air, scattering sparks across the wood. No. They're already stirring. Danzo's voice suddenly rose, rough with urgency. Hiruzen inhaled deeply, smoke curling in his lungs, then released it in a heavy sigh. The haze veiled the weariness etched deep in his eyes. The hidden cloud has sent signals for peace talks, he said, shifting the discussion. That is our priority now. Danzo let out a cold, derisive snort but eventually followed Hiruzen's lead. After their last failed operation, Kumogakure has indeed pulled back from the border. The village can't hold out much longer either. Hiruzen's voice was steady, but the weight behind it was clear. His fingers absently traced the warm curve of the pipe. 3 years of deadlock at the border had drained both sides. For the hidden cloud, the true danger wasn't only mounting casualties. The land of lightning was a realm of mountains and cliffs, with little flat ground for farming. Its scarce fertile land grew cash crops for profit. With the collapse of trade with Fire Country and Konoha's allied nations, their grain imports had all but dried up. On the surface, Konoha was nothing more than a military village, a hired blade. It had no authority to dictate the Land of Fire's policies, nor to meddle in foreign trade. But reality rarely aligned with appearances. Danzo's route was never bound by the courtesies of diplomacy. They struck like ghosts across every route, not only ambushing merchant caravans bound for the Land of Lightning with surgical precision, but also turning the spoils into supplies, feeding Konoha's war machine. With land routes completely paralyzed, the Land of Lightning was forced to rely on sea transport alone. Grain prices soared, basic goods grew scarce, and civilian life collapsed into hardship. The rakeage, harried by mounting complaints, had been summoned repeatedly by the daimyo. The Kumogakure raid that wiped out Roche's squad had been the last desperate lunge of an exhausted force. Its failure left only silence, a silence that spoke of collapse. Konoha, by contrast, still had food and supplies, but years of unending conflict weighed like a millstone, grinding down the villagers' patience and hope. War weariness spread like wildfire in the unseen corners of the village. With Kumogakure now extending an olive branch, both sides had finally reached the end of this war of attrition. These past few years, the village has been stretched thin, Hiruzen said, his voice cool and official once more. Too many missions have piled up. Rogue ninja run rampant in the Land of Trees and at D Port. Order is fraying. Root will investigate first. Stabilize the situation. I will see to it. Danzo's reply was flat, drained of inflection. He rose with the aid of his cane, his wide robes stirring a faint draft. 2 masked Root operatives slipped out of the shadows behind him, their presence quiet, suffocating, like still water. The heavy doors creaked open. Light from the corridor spilled inside, scattering the gloom and smoke for a brief instant. In that sliver of brightness, Danzo came face to face with Roshi, who was just about to knock. Advisor. Roshi inclined his head, his tone even. Danzo did not break stride. His hawk-like gaze, sharp and merciless, cut across Roshi as if to peel back flesh and lay bare every secret within. At last, he exhaled a faint, dismissive age, and swept past. With the 2 Root shinobi gliding behind him, the 3 figures bled back into the darkness of the corridor until they were gone. Only then did Roshi lift his eyes again and push open the Hokage door. The familiar smell of tobacco, heavy and bitter, mingled with the dry scent of parchment. Roshi approached the desk and set down a paper packet, his compiled mission history and personal records from the past years. Hokage-sama. His voice broke the silence. The solemn weight on Hiruzen's face seemed to ease, if only slightly. Setting his pipe aside, he regarded Roshi with a softened, almost paternal gaze. You're here. About the recommendation letters. He slid open a drawer. Hayami and Kaji have already sent theirs. Producing 2 sealed scrolls, he placed them neatly on the corner of the desk. The assessment mission will focus on specialized ninjutsu evaluation. Your mastery of elemental techniques has always been excellent. This should not pose a problem, should it? I'll be prepared. Roshi's response was sharp, disciplined, no wasted words. One more thing. Hiruzen reached into the drawer again, withdrawing a slim file. He passed it across the desk. Regarding your squad members. This child, for certain reasons, we haven't been able to place her on a team. After consideration, I believe joining yours may be the best option. Roshi accepted the file, his eyes falling on the photograph clipped inside. A short girl with untamed, violet hair stared back at him. Her gaze carried a streak of wildness, and the faint curve of her lips hinted at a careless, mocking smile. Anko Mitarashi. Anko Mitarashi, disciple of Orochimaru, one of Konoha's legendary Sannin, had once stood in good esteem. But ever since her master was exposed for conducting forbidden experiments on villagers and declared a rogue ninja, her position in the village had grown increasingly precarious. She and Roshi shared the same birth year, Konoha year 40, and had even sat in the same ninja academy class, though never in the same group. Their connection, at best, was little more than acquaintanceship, familiar faces, nothing more. After Orochimaru's fall, Anko was imprisoned by the Anbu for months. Only after exhaustive investigation was she cleared of suspicion and released, a gesture that felt more like a formality than genuine absolution. Orochimaru's crimes were too grave for even Hiruzen to shield: the murder of villagers, human experimentation, and the shattering of Konoha's most sacred foundation. For over 50 years, clans had united under the banner of hidden villages. The most basic condition of coexistence was simple: clans did not prey on each other. Orochimaru had violated that rule, and for that alone, he could no longer remain within Konoha. Yet killing him outright was another matter. Orochimaru was a Sannin, a war hero, the Hokuto's own disciple. His contributions to Konoha were countless, his influence within the village vast. A clean execution might have satisfied justice, but it would also fracture the village. In the end, Hiruzen had chosen the middle road. He struck Orochimaru down but stopped short of the killing blow, allowing him to flee. Officially, Konoha would treat him as any other missing nin. Unofficially, he had been allowed to escape. And if such leniency was shown to the master, it naturally extended to his disciples and subordinates. In a true military purge, Anko and others like her would never have walked free. But Konoha's punishment was more thunder than rain. For Roshi, this made his squad situation complicated. 2 teammates, one a child, the other fresh out of interrogation, each carrying backgrounds that would draw stares. Hardly an ideal team, but he wasn't in a position to argue. The special Jonin assessment arranged by the Hokuto was still pending. The examiners were out on missions, and until their return, Roshi could only wait. Waiting, however, did not mean idleness. In the old forest behind the Senju compound, he sat cross-legged in meditation. Weeks of quiet training had sharpened his senses. Now he could clearly sense the subtle disturbances caused when his would release drew at the edges of natural energy. Ripples, faint yet distinct, like silent currents moving through the deep sea. The threshold of perception had been crossed. The next step was guidance, drawing this primal energy into himself. But to recklessly touch it with his own body was suicide. One mistake, and he would end as nothing more than a petrified husk among the roots. In the original story, Naruto had overcome this hurdle with shadow clones, using them to absorb natural energy in his stead. Roshi had something even better: wood clones. Unlike shadow clones, they weren't just fragile copies. They could carry his power, move with his flexibility, and, most crucially, share their senses with the original in real time. Where shadow clones needed to disperse to transfer memories, wood clones were seamless extensions of self. This meant he could attempt sage training with them. Even if a clone failed and turned to stone, only the clone would be lost. His true body would remain unharmed. The realization struck with the clarity of lightning. Roshi pressed his hands together, and with a soft rustle of bark and leaves, a wood clone peeled itself away from his body. Roshi closed his eyes, mind drawn taut like a bowstring. His perception stretched outward, threading itself into the wood clone's body like unseen neural synapses, sharing its every sense. His intent pulsed clearly through the link. Perceive. Guide. Absorb the natural energy drifting through this forest. The wood clone obeyed. At first, only the whisper of leaves stirred by the wind filled the silence. Then, a subtle heaviness bled into the air. The atmosphere thickened. The motes of light seeping through the branches seemed to drift sluggishly, as though weighed down. Through their shared senses, Roshi felt it. This was no longer a vague ripple. It was immersion in a vast, invisible ocean of life. Countless motes of energy, shimmering like translucent stardust, drifted and flowed around the wood clone, each particle pulsing with primal vitality. The clone reached out, guiding its chakra to brush against a single wisp. The instant that thread of natural energy entered its body, a violent torrent erupted. Brimming with vitality yet burning with corrosive force, it rampaged through the clone like molten life essence poured into a fragile vessel. The wood clone convulsed. Chakra that formed its body warped and buckled. Rough wooden textures crawled across its skin, twisting its form into something monstrous. Joints cracked and groaned as its body swelled, reshaping into a grotesque fusion of man and tree. Roshi's brow furrowed. His face blanched as the backlash tore through their shared link. The pain was sharp, raw, as though his own flesh were being warped into bark and fiber. Yet he gritted his teeth, forcing himself to watch. The clone's transformation accelerated. Just before its human shape was lost entirely, a creeping pallor spread across the wooden growths. Ashen stone-like petrification devoured the rampant vitality, racing over bark and limb until the entire figure threatened to become nothing but a twisted statue. Roshi's heart tightened. His voice cut through the stillness. Release. With a sharp bang, the half-tree, half-stone monstrosity collapsed into a heap of charred wood and scattered fragments, dissolving into fading motes of dust. Roshi exhaled slowly, his eyes opening. A fine sheen of sweat clung to his brow, but a glimmer of insight sharpened his gaze. Failure, but not without reward. The experiment revealed the truth. Natural energy did not strengthen everything blindly. It magnified what was inherent. For the toads of Mount Mayaboku and the serpents of Ryuchi Cave, it heightened the powers of their kind. For his wood clone, forged from wood release itself, it seized upon the latent essence of wood, a shadow of the divine tree's nature, and drove it into rampant growth until the vessel collapsed. He studied the charred remnants scattered across the forest floor, thoughtful. So, natural energy responds to the core of what you are. As the realization settled, a sudden flutter of wings disturbed the silence. A black-feathered eagle swooped soundlessly from the night sky, alighting on a branch before him. Its sharp eyes glinted as it extended its beak, offering a small wooden message tube sealed with wax, the unmistakable mark of the Hoku's office. Roshi unrolled the parchment. The familiar, slightly scrawled yet forceful handwriting of Hiruzen sprawled across it. Roshi, the assessment examiner has returned. 3 days from now, at noon, third training ground. 3 days later, at noon, Konoha's third training ground lay under the merciless summer sun. The earth was baked yellow and hot enough to scorch bare skin, the air shimmering with heat haze. Cicadas shrilled relentlessly, amplifying the heavy dryness of the day. Roshi arrived precisely on time. He wore Konoha's dark green flak jacket, forehead protector polished and straight. At the center of the training ground, 2 figures already stood waiting in silence. Both wore the standard dark gray uniforms of the Anbu, faces hidden behind expressionless animal masks that revealed neither identity nor emotion. One was taller, his stance carrying an almost lazy nonchalance. Stray strands of silver hair slipped free from the mask's edge, catching the sunlight like slivers of steel. The other was thinner, younger, perhaps a year or 2 below Roshi, his posture perfectly straight and unmoving. Special Jonin Promotion Assessment. Subject, Roshi, the taller Anbu announced, his voice flat, measured, yet beneath the mask, that faint, drawn-out tone carried a trace of familiarity. We are your examiners. Demonstrate the ninjutsu you've mastered. Evaluation criteria: power, control, efficiency, and combat adaptability. Through the mask's hollow eyes, his gaze fixed on Roshi. Begin when ready. There was no ceremony, no wasted words, just the cold efficiency of Anbu. The very next instant, the silver-haired Anbu blurred. Roshi's pupils constricted, body snapping to the side on instinct. ZZZZT. A blinding spear of blue lightning carved through the space he had just vacated, leaving a blackened scorch and the sharp stench of ozone. The silver-haired Anbu stood there, right hand blazing with writhing lightning. Lightning release. Kaidori. Even restrained, the sheer speed and oppressive killing intent revealed the gulf in experience. Combat reaction. Satisfactory. The voice murmured from behind the mask. But the assault didn't stop. His hands blurred into seals. Fire release. Great fireball jutsu. A roaring sphere of flame surged forward, cutting off Roshi's escape. Roshi's hands moved even faster. Water release. Water wall. A surging wall of water burst up, colliding with the fireball. Hiss. Steam exploded outward, engulfing the battlefield in a choking white mist. Using the cover, Roshi retreated swiftly, fingers weaving another set of seals. Wind release. Great breakthrough. A howling gale erupted, dispersing the mist in seconds and hurtling toward the silver-haired Anbu. But his opponent's figure swayed like a phantom, slipping between the gusts as though he had predicted their flow. Earth release. Earth wall. A solid barrier erupted from the ground, intercepting the wind head-on. Yet just as the wall rose, razor-thin wind blades sliced in from a blind angle. TCH. A faint click of annoyance echoed from behind the mask as the Anbu twisted at an impossible angle, barely evading. The hem of his cloak fluttered to the ground, neatly severed. Wind release control, excellent, he muttered. At that moment, the younger Anbu finally moved. He clasped his hands together, chakra surging with rigid precision. Wood release, silent strangling jutsu. From beneath Roshi's feet, thick vines erupted like awakened serpents, coiling hungrily toward his ankles. Wood release. Yamato. Roshi's heart tightened. Earth release. Rock collapse. The ground beneath him split with a violent crack, collapsing into a shallow pit. The vines were crushed and tangled in the falling stone. Their advance instantly stalled. Seizing the opening, Roshi leapt skyward, hands already completing another string of seals. Lightning release. Ground flash. Blue arcs crackled like a spreading spiderweb, racing through the fractured ground, streaking straight toward the younger Anbu who had just finished his jutsu. The shorter Anbu betrayed no panic. His hands came together again, movement smooth and mechanical. Wood release. Wood golem wall. Thick wooden pillars arched from the ground in a perfect curve, forming a seamless barrier around him. Lightning slammed into the wall with a crackling roar, leaving scorched black marks, but the dark brown wood held firm, unmoved by the assault. From the flank, the silver-haired Anbu closed in silently, a kunai crackling with dense lightning in his grip, its shrill hum sharp and venomous, like the fangs of a snake poised to strike. With a piercing screech, the blade darted for Roshi's ribs, aiming at his blind spot. Caught midair, nowhere to plant his feet, Roshi did not falter. His fingers flashed through two quick seals. Snake, dragon. Wind release. Gale. A powerful gust burst forth, its recoil blasting his body sideways, narrowly carrying him out of the kunai's lethal arc. He landed in a crouch, breath uneven, sweat beading on his forehead. The silver-haired Anbu dropped to the ground opposite him, expression unreadable behind the mask. Ninjutsu application. Proficient. Chakra reserves. Abundant. His voice was flat, clinical. With this much alone, Roshi's qualification as a special jonin was all but certain. But the assessment wasn't finished. The shorter Anbu stepped forward, his mask's hollow eyes locking onto Roshi. His hands clasped together once more. Wood release. Deep forest emergence. Rumble. The earth heaved violently. Countless gnarled roots burst free, thick as pythons, writhing skyward as trees exploded into being. In moments, the open training ground became a suffocating miniature forest, a living cage pulsing with primal vitality. Branches swayed with deceptive grace in the sunlight, yet the crushing force behind them was suffocating, pressing in from every direction to strangle the lone shinobi within. The silver-haired Anbu leapt back, gaze locked on the storm at the center of the field. Roshi inhaled deeply, forming a shadow clone in an instant. Chakra surged in his body, refined and mold at a furious pace. His hands blurred through seals, fingers leaving after images. Fire release, fire dragon bullet. From his mouth erupted a condensed crimson dragon of flame, its heat searing, its roar splitting the air as it tore into the encroaching trees. At the same time, the clone's hands danced through its own seals. A savage gale spiraled into being. Wind fuels fire. Boom! The crimson dragon swelled monstrously, its flames turning blinding white hot. No longer fire. It was a blazing wind dragon, incandescent and unstoppable, barreling toward the forest's weaker flank. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The explosion shattered the air. The blazing beast carved through the trees, ripping them apart like brittle kindling. Branches and trunks, sturdy enough to withstand lightning, disintegrated into ash and sparks under its fury. In its wake, a scorched passageway was torn open through the forest, blackened and burning, smoke curling thick in the sweltering heat. Roshi burst out from the flaming corridor, his figure cutting through the haze. His flak jacket was scorched, his face streaked with ash, but his eyes remained steady, calm and unwavering as they locked on the two examiners. The training ground lay in ruin. The lush green forest had been carved open by raw force, its smoldering edges crackling with dying fire. Charred branches collapsed with sharp snaps, the acrid scent of smoke filling the air. The silver-haired Anbu studied the destruction, then the shinobi who had emerged from it. Slowly, he lowered his lightning-clad kunai. Ninjutsu coordination. Timing, power, control, excellent. His voice, though flat, carried finality. Assessment concluded. Special Jonin qualification. Confirmed and granted. The afterglow of the setting sun washed the courtyard of the old Senju compound in shades of amber and crimson, stretching the eve shadows long across the ground. When Roshi pushed open the wooden gate, he found Grandma Momoka with her back to him, quietly trimming a potted pine. The soft snip-snip of her scissors carried clearly in the hushed air. "Grandma, I'm back." Roshi's voice broke the stillness. She didn't turn. Only a faint nod, almost imperceptible, acknowledged his arrival. How was the assessment? Her tone was flat, stripped of warmth or surprise. "I passed. Special Jonin qualification." The silence stretched. Roshi shifted slightly, lowering his voice. The examiners were two ANBU. One, silver-haired, strong in lightning release and taijutsu. The other. His gaze flickered. Used would release. At that, Grandma Momoka's hands froze mid-motion. She laid the scissors down, turned, and fixed Roshi with a gaze suddenly sharp as steel. Her voice cut through the stillness. "You countered with would release." "No." Roshi shook his head firmly, meeting her piercing stare. "I relied only on ordinary ninjutsu." The courtyard fell quiet again, broken only by the rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. After a long pause, a dry scoff escaped her lips. "Hiruzen. Oh, Hiruzen. You've grown so old." Roshi's eyes narrowed. "Grandma, you already knew of this would release shinobi." She didn't deny it. Her hand returned to the scissors, but instead of resuming her pruning, her fingers absently stroked the cold metal handle. "That child's ANBU codename is Tenzo. Long before that, in Danzo's root, he was called Kino." Her voice lowered, heavy with scorn. "A defective creation of Danzo and Oro Kaimaru, built upon a mountain of corpses. He survived, yes, and he can force trees to grow, but he is a pale shadow of Lord Hashirama, and of you." Her gaze flicked to Roshi, weighted with meanings he could not yet parse. "He is something different." Roshi's pupils contracted. Oro Kaimaru. Danzo. The wood release experiments. Kino. Tenzo. Grandma knew these names too well. "You." His voice dropped, taut with disbelief. "You were involved." The scissors halted. Slowly, Momoka raised her eyes, her gaze like a honed blade, sinking deep into his. This scrutiny was sharper than before, a silent test of his composure. The air beneath the veranda seemed to harden. the evening wind skirting around the tension rather than dispersing it. At last, she spoke, her words slow, deliberate, and heavy. In the earliest hashirama cell implantation trials, the volunteers were our own, loyal, capable, trustworthy. Us. But the toll was too great for the village to bear, and so the project was halted. Officially. Her eyes grew colder. But Konoha still craved a weapon to control the tailed beasts. If their own couldn't be sacrificed, then outsiders were chosen. Danzo and Orochimaru were given silent permission to continue, and because these were Hashirama's cells, the Senju could never be fully absent. Each word fell like a hammer blow on Roshi's chest, stripping away the gilded surface of Konoha to expose the rot festering beneath. Yet to her quiet astonishment, Roshi's expression barely shifted. His brows furrowed, his gaze turned inward with thought, but the storm of emotion she expected never came. Instead, he met her revelations with an almost unnerving calm, cold, and steady. There was no anger, no wounded disappointment, only a strange serenity, as though Roshi had long anticipated this revelation and was calmly digesting it now. Momoka's heart stirred. Something about this reaction was wrong. Too composed. A 14-year-old boy, hearing such dark truths for the first time. Where was the outrage? The shock? Instead, his profile remained calm in the fading light. The thought that had haunted her since his grave injury, that she wished only for him to live safely, rose once again, blotting out her tangled emotions. You. Her voice carried the faintest trace of probing, but her tone softened without her noticing, tinged with an elder's concern. Don't you feel angry at what the village has done? Don't you feel betrayed? Her words pressed harder. Roshi was quiet for a moment. His gaze drifted past her, settling on the moss-covered stone lantern in the corner of the courtyard. Bathed in twilight, the dark green clinging stubbornly to its surface seemed almost defiant in its quiet endurance. An individual's moral code cannot restrain a vast collective that survives on power, Roshi finally said, his voice steady. Nor can it be used to judge a leader forced to choose in a cruel reality. He paused, his eyes returning to hers, calm yet impossibly deep. Survival and development are the truest correctness. Whether something is dirty depends on what it's meant to achieve, and whether there was ever a cleaner choice to begin with. Private morality can neither bind the beast that is the collective, nor serve as the sole measure for a leader wading through the mire. The words fell like stones into still water, sending ripples through Momoka's long-settled heart. The ruthless clarity, the pragmatic wisdom, they struck her harder than she cared to admit. For the first time, she felt with startling certainty that this boy she had raised had changed. No, more than changed. Reborn. That composure, that insight into the world's harsh machinery, far outstripped his years. A flicker of surprise, laced with an emotion she could not name, passed through her chest. The village does need power to balance the tailed beasts, Roshi continued. But the Uchiha's Sharingan, doesn't it also have the ability to control them? If it's truly about the greater good, wouldn't they? Uchiha. Her sharp laugh cut him off. She looked at him as though he had said something naive, almost childish. In all 54 years since Konoha's founding, the Sharingan has controlled a tailed beast exactly twice. Her eyes hardened. The first was Uchiha Madara, when he attacked the village with the Nine Tails. The second was just 3 years ago, the Nine Tails rampage. Her voice rose, edged with scorn. The Sharingan once again bound the Nine Tails, unleashing it upon the village. That night cost us the 4th Hokage, dozens of Jonin, hundreds of Chunin and Genin, sacrificed just to restrain the beast's fury. Her hand clenched faintly over the scissors. This so-called ability to control tailed beasts, in the Uchiha's hands, is nothing but a blade hanging above the village's throat, ready to fall at any moment. Roshi said nothing. There was no counter-argument, only the weight of blood and truth. Even without Madara, the scars of the Nine Tails rampage 3 years ago had yet to fade. Do I need to report back an answer to the Hokage's probe? Roshi shifted the conversation, his voice returning to its unsettling calm, as though the heavy words about the Uchiha had left no mark on him. Momoka studied him in silence. Her sharp gaze searched for cracks in his composure, for the thoughts he would not say aloud. but all she found was stillness. At last, her sigh escaped, heavy with exhaustion yet tinged with reluctant understanding. So be it. She waved her hand, as though brushing away dust that wasn't there. This old woman will make the arrangements. 3 years ago, the claws and flames of the Ninetales tore through Konoha's heart, leaving its central district in smoldering ruins. Yet in the aftermath of that devastation, opportunity emerged. The old Konoha had been little more than a haphazard settlement, born when the Senju and Uchiha shook hands and carved out peace. The founders could never have imagined it swelling into the sprawling shinobi village of today, sheltering tens of thousands. But the growth had been chaotic. Clan compounds of later joined families sprouted in scattered clusters, jutting out like stubborn-boned spurs, restricting the village's development. The Ninetales attack, though a catastrophe, was like a brutal surgeon's cut. Those spurs were ripped away, giving Konoha's planners the freedom to reshape the village with cold, rational precision. Now, the Hokage building stood as the unquestioned core, with new residential and commercial zones radiating outward in neat order. The clan districts were pushed to the outskirts, tidy, contained, easier to monitor. And of all the clans, the Uchiha were sent farthest. The official reasoning was lofty: proximity to the police force headquarters, efficiency in patrolling, and maintaining public order. But every shinobi who had lived through that night still remembered it vividly. The Ninetales, its eyes swirling with the crimson tomo of the Sharingan. That image alone was damning. The exile could not have been more blatant. Uchiha Fugaku, the clan head, had swallowed it in silence. Rage and humiliation burned in his chest like molten iron, but he could do nothing. At the entrance to the Uchiha district, a small figure already waited. Uchiha Itachi. His clan uniform of deep blue bore the fan crest proudly on his back. His black eyes, calm and unreadable, turned toward Roshi. "Roshi-senpai," he said with a polite bow, voice steady. "Father instructed me to wait here and escort you." "Thank you, Itachi." Roshi inclined his head, studying the boy. Today, Itachi's presence felt even calmer and more reserved than usual. Now that Roshi had officially earned the rank of Special Jonin, he was also stepping into his new role as captain. Itachi joining his squad was already decided, but sending an 8-year-old into missions ranked B and higher required one unavoidable formality: facing Uchiha Fugaku. Roshi himself had gone to war at 11. But in the shinobi world, 8 and 11 were starkly different. One was still a child at the academy. The other, already a soldier with blood on his blade. "Senpai, this is your first time in the Uchiha district, isn't it?" Itachi asked as he led the way, his tone quiet but steady. "Yes. I was stationed at the border for years," Roshi replied, his eyes following the boy while also scanning the surroundings with measured caution. The Uchiha compound felt enclosed. An invisible barrier seemed to separate it from the rest of Konoha. Inside the entrance, the streets were immaculately kept, flanked by traditional wooden houses with tiled roofs. Small shops lined the lanes, tool vendors, modest eateries exuding savory aromas, and even a refined dessert shop with delicate mochi displayed behind spotless glass. Pedestrians were few, mostly Uchiha in their clan blues and blacks, nodding politely as they passed each other, forming the air of a self-contained, insular community. It was clean, disciplined, almost too perfect. But Roshi noticed the eyes. The civilians, women, elders, and children, looked at him with curiosity, tinged with unease. The shinobi, however, were different. Their gazes cut sharp as kunai, openly appraising him, weighing, measuring, and quietly rejecting. The district itself seemed detached, a village within a village, watchful, walled off, and quietly hostile. Roshi's steps faltered for the briefest instant. It wasn't the stairs. It was something else, an unseen gaze, distant yet unwavering, fixed on the main gate behind him. "Brother! Brother!" A high, innocent voice rang out, shattering the tension. From a side alley, a tiny figure, barely 3 years old, came barreling forward in a blur of enthusiasm. Dressed in a miniature clan uniform, his little legs pumped furiously as he launched himself toward Itachi. Uchiha Sasuke. He ignored Roshi completely, eyes locked on his brother as he collided into him like a cannonball, clinging tightly to Itachi's leg. His wide, great black eyes sparkled with pure joy. "Brother, play shuriken with me. Right now." For the first time, Itachi's mask of calm cracked. His expression softened, melting in an instant. Bending down, he ruffled Sasuke's soft black hair with infinite gentleness. "Sasuke," he said softly, "I need to take Senpai to see father first. I'll play with you later, alright?" Sasuke's tiny mouth immediately pouted, his round face crumpling with grievance. His large eyes shimmered with unshed tears, yet despite his reluctance, he obediently nodded and let go of Itachi's hand. Before retreating, he stole a curious glance at Roshi, then scampered back into the alley, glancing over his shoulder every few steps as though unwilling to leave his brother's side. At some point, Fugaku had appeared at the entrance of the residence. He stood in silence, his expression unreadable. Only when Sasuke disappeared into the alley did his deep gaze shift to Roshi, an inscrutable glint flickering within it. Itachi straightened, his composure returning instantly. He gave Roshi a small nod, signaling to continue forward. Soon, they arrived before an imposing residence. Halting at the threshold, Itachi stepped aside with practiced respect. "Senpai, father is waiting for you inside." Fugaku's eyes were already on Roshi. Roshi offered a courteous nod, slipped off his sandals, and stepped into the entryway. Itachi remained in the shadow of the outer corridor, while Fugaku stood tall within the inner hall, his presence commanding. The Uchiha patriarch was as rigid as a pine tree, dressed in dark clan robes, his face composed as still water. His gaze carried the weight of scrutiny, cool and assessing. "Roshi, special jonin," Fugaku intoned, his voice deep and even, as though simply verifying facts. "I have long heard of your achievements at the border, and of your recent promotion to special jonin. Truly, a formidable young man." "Clan head Fugaku, you honor me," Roshi replied, bowing slightly, his tone measured and respectful. "I have only done my duty." Fugaku inclined his head and gestured toward the interior. They moved into the reception room, kneeling opposite one another on the tatami mats. Mikoto quietly entered, setting down steaming cups of green tea before excusing herself. The faint aroma lingered in the air, along with a subtle tension. To Roshi's mild surprise, Fugaku did not begin with warnings about Itachi's safety or the risks of missions. Instead, he lifted his cup and asked in a calm tone, "I hear you reside in the old estate on the western outskirts, raised and tutored by Lady Momoka herself." "Yes," Roshi answered evenly, raising his cup. "Grandmother has always looked after me." Fugaku set his tea down with a faint clink against the low table. "It is said your ninjutsu is exceptional, mastering all 5 elements. War on the border truly forges talent." "Only through necessity was I able to practice so widely," Roshi replied modestly. Fugaku gave a small nod, then let the matter drop. His gaze drifted past the paper screen to the courtyard beyond. "Roshi-kun, you entered with Itachi just now. What impression did our district leave upon you?" Roshi paused, weighing his words carefully. "It is tranquil, the clan members live orderly lives, and everything one needs is within reach. It seems, the Uchiha are very self-sufficient." "Self-sufficient?" Fugaku repeated softly, the faintest curve tugging at the corner of his mouth. His gaze lingered on the quiet courtyard as his voice deepened. "Yes. We are peaceful and self-contained. But distance from the village center also means less interaction." He let the words hang briefly, then turned back to Roshi with the calm authority of a leader. "From now on, when Itachi joins missions, I will entrust him to you. His talent is great, but his experience is shallow. He will need your guidance." "It will be my responsibility, Clan Head Fugaku. You have my word." A sharper gleam flickered in Fugaku's eyes for an instant, gone before Roshi could place it. Rising smoothly, the clan head ended the meeting. "Itachi, see Roshi-kun out." Both men stood. Fugaku accompanied Roshi to the entrance but went no further. Stepping outside, Roshi blinked against the bright afternoon sun. Itachi waited quietly beneath the veranda. When Roshi emerged, the boy moved ahead, guiding him wordlessly down the street. Even as they walked away, Roshi could still feel Fugaku's gaze pressing against his back, a heavy weight of silent scrutiny that lingered until he turned the corner and it finally lifted. The air within the clan district remained thick with detachment, the faint sweetness of mochi drifting from the small dessert shop nearby. Itachi's steps were steady, but to Roshi's keen eyes, the boy's silence carried a subtle note of inner conflict. Senpai holds another identity father is wary of, Itachi thought. But the question? I cannot ask. After meeting Itachi, Roshi's next stop was Anko Mitarashi. She lived in one of the village's ninja apartments in the center of Konoha, basic, no-frills housing provided to shinobi. One room, one kitchen, one bathroom. Simple, cheap, and just enough for a single person. Anko had no parents. Like many of her generation outside of the great clans, the endless wars had left her an orphan. Such children were raised in the village orphanage, then moved into these apartments once they were old enough for the academy. Rent was free during their studies, and once a month the administrative staff came by with allowances, checkups, and the bare minimum of care. But in the past 3 years, these apartments had become overcrowded, filled with young shinobi trying to survive. Thump, thump. The sound of knocking echoed down the corridor. A dragging shuffle followed, then a muffled, weary voice from behind the door. Coming? Who is it? The door creaked open a crack. The girl behind it was nothing like the lively-eyed face in her mission file photo. 14-year-old Anko Mitarashi looked worn out. Her purple hair stuck out in messy tangles, and she wore a loose black mesh shirt with faded shorts. The stale air that spilled out carried the cloying scent of rotting sweets, unemptied trash, and long-stale room air. She squinted against the corridor's light, focusing on the figure outside. The face looked familiar, especially the eyes and brow that stirred old memories of their academy days. Roshi? Roshi, she asked hesitantly, her frown showing both confusion and recognition. What are you doing here? The boy she remembered had always stood apart, cold-eyed, sharp, like someone carrying a burden heavier than his years. But the one in front of her radiated a calmer, steadier aura that made the contrast jarring. The village should have sent you a notice, Roshi said evenly, his gaze taking in her exhausted state. You've been assigned to my squad. Anko scratched her tangled hair, blinking like someone dragged out of a long daze. Maybe I did hear something about that. She stepped aside, waving a hand with half-hearted casualness. Come in. But don't expect much. It's just like this. She didn't even bother to make excuses. Roshi nodded once and stepped inside. His eyes swept the cramped apartment. Empty ramen bowls littered the tatami, a half-eaten dango skewer had hardened to stone on the floor, and soda cans were scattered around the low table. It wasn't a complete disaster, but clearly no one had cleaned in weeks. The air itself felt heavy with neglect. Without a word, Roshi crossed the room, rolled up his sleeves, and picked up the broom in the corner. He began sweeping with practiced ease, every movement calm and natural, as though it were the most ordinary thing in the world. Anko blinked in surprise, then yelped when he moved to sweep away the old dango. Hey! Don't touch that. I wasn't done with it yet. You can't just, that's rude. Go boil some water, Roshi replied flatly, not even looking up. When a guest visits, the least you offer is hot water. Tea, if you have it. Plain water will do. He flicked several cans neatly into the trash bin without missing a beat. You. Anko's words caught in her throat. She stared at him, unsettled by the sight. How could the top student from the academy, the one who always seemed so untouchable, be cleaning her apartment like some domestic husband? And worse, acting as though it was the most natural thing in the world. In the end, all she managed was a muttered, "Fine, fine," before trudging off to the kitchen. The sound of a kettle clinking onto the stove drifted out. Meanwhile, Roshi worked quickly. Trash gathered, bowls stacked, curtains yanked open. Fresh air and sunlight spilled into the room, sweeping away the stale gloom in an instant. When Anko returned with 2 steaming cups, the space already felt different, lighter, livable. She set a cup in front of Roshi, kept the other for herself, and sat cross-legged across from him. Her expression was conflicted, caught somewhere between embarrassment, annoyance, and the strange warmth of being cared for. Roshi reached into a paper bag and slid it across the table toward her. Inside were several skewers of glossy, sugar-glazed three-color dango, still warm, their sweet aroma filling the air. Anko's eyes lit up, only to narrow with suspicion a moment later. "What's this? Trying to bribe me? You were never like this before." A voice carried both wariness and confusion. "I bought them on the way," Roshi said simply. He pulled out a skewer, bit into it, and closed his eyes briefly in satisfaction. Soft, chewy, sweet. Much better than that dried-out rock you were chewing on." His tone was light and casual, like he was simply sharing food with a friend. Anko stared at him, then at the tempting dango. Her stomach growled audibly, betraying her. She hesitated, chewing her lip, but finally reached out. Taking a skewer, she bit carefully into it. Warm, chewy mochi and sugary glaze melted on her tongue, and a long-forgotten sweetness spread through her senses. Her eyes half closed in pleasure, a small sigh slipping out before she could stop it. "It's good," she muttered, cheeks faintly pink as she ate, sneaking sideways glances at Roshi all the while. The young man in front of her sat calmly, eating dango, with a faint trace of dust still clinging to him from cleaning the room. Something about that sight made her feel both strange and unfamiliar. "You've been living off these all this time." Roshi tilted his chin toward the instant noodle cups and snack bags littering the floor. His tone wasn't accusatory. It was more like he was confirming what he already knew about her situation. "What else?" Anko muttered around a mouthful of dango, her words slightly slurred with apathy. "No missions, eating out is expensive, and I can't be bothered to go outside." She didn't add the truth, that she couldn't bear the sympathetic, scrutinizing, or wary stares waiting for her beyond her door. Border skirmishes have eased up. Plenty of missions piled up, merchant routes, rogue ninja cleanup, caravan escorts, and border patrols. C rank, D rank, take your pick. The village hasn't assigned you any. Roshi swallowed before speaking again. Anko froze, her gaze fixed on the glossy bamboo skewer in her hand. "They did. Fetching pets, pulling weeds. I didn't take them." Her voice fell to a whisper. "It's boring." "Boring, or is it that you can't bring yourself to care?" Roshi's calm eyes dropped to her hand, gripping the skewer so tightly her knuckles whitened. His voice stayed steady. Anko's head snapped up, irritation flashing in her eyes at being read so easily. But beneath it was something heavier. Weariness, confusion. "Does it even matter? Whether I care or not? It's all the same anyway." She turned her face toward the sunlight spilling through the window. "Back then, with him, I always had a goal. To grow stronger. To learn. Now." Her lips curled into a bitter smile, mocking herself. "Now it feels like my bones have been stripped out. I can't bring myself to do anything. Orokaimaru, sensei, why?" Her words broke off into a harsh gasp, choked with hatred and despair. Roshi listened without interrupting, offering no comfort, no false wisdom. He only reached for another skewer of dango, chewing unhurriedly, giving her space to bleed her emotions out. The room filled with the sound of her uneven breathing, punctuated by the faint chirping of birds outside. That quiet, unpressured presence made her chest feel a little lighter. "Anger, hatred, it's normal," Roshi finally said once her breathing steadied, his voice as even as if he were commenting on the weather. "But life doesn't stop. Locking yourself away, rotting on instant noodles and stale dango. What good does that do you?" He dropped the empty skewer and looked at her directly, his words blunt. "Even the dullest missions pay enough for fresh meals and dango that isn't hard. Missions keep your body moving and your head busy. That's better than wasting away in here." Anko stared at him. From anyone else, those words would have felt shallow, ignorant of her pain. But Roshi, who had quietly cleaned her room and brought her fresh food, spoke with a grounded weight she couldn't ignore. No sympathy. No lecturing. Just the plain truth. Life must go on. "You really have changed the way you talk." Anko's lips tugged in a faint pout, her tone complicated. Yet the dullness in her eyes had softened. She glanced at the fresh sugar glaze glistening on her half-eaten dango, its sweetness catching the sunlight. Fresh really did taste better. Abruptly, she shoved the rest into her mouth, chewing fiercely as if to swallow something deeper along with it. But you're right. She swallowed, wiped the sugar from the corner of her lips, and looked up. Pain still lingered, but there was a faint spark now, fragile, but real. I can't just rot here. It really is pointless. She hesitated, then asked with a flicker of her old spirit, Captain, when's the next mission? C rank? B rank? The corner of Roche's mouth twitched upward. I won't let you sit idle. As for the mission, wait for the notice. In the meantime. He rose, scanning the room that, though tidied, still felt empty. Thoroughly clean this place again. Next time I come, I want it kept this way. And hot tea. You're so demanding. Fine, fine. Anko groaned, though her tone lacked true resistance. Watching Roche's back as he headed for the door, the protest almost sounded alive. As he slid the door open, she blurted, Hey, Roche. He glanced back. Thanks. Her voice dipped, eyes shifting away. After a beat, she added, for the dango. And the cleaning. Roche only nodded, silent as ever, and stepped out. When the door shut, the quiet pressed in again. Yet it felt different now, lighter. The sweet aroma of dango and the scent of fresh sunlight lingered in the air. Anko looked at her empty hands, then around the clean room. Sunlight spilled across the floor in warm, unbroken patches. She drew in a long, deep breath of fresh air through the open window, and slowly exhaled, as though expelling something stale from her chest. Her eyes fell on the broom leaning in the corner. She walked over, gripped it tight, and this time, on her own, began sweeping up the last of the trash. With the team roster essentially settled, Roche's focus shifted to something more practical, squad tactics. This was no longer the straightforward formation of his previous team. One member specialized in ninja tools and genjutsu, another in taijutsu, while he himself served as the ninjutsu-type chunin, responsible for firepower suppression in complex engagements. This new team, however, had an unusual and volatile structure. He spread paper across the desk, pen scratching steadily as ink bled into crisp points and notes. Uchiha Itachi. Advantages. A prodigy far beyond his peers. His ninjutsu mastery has already reached chunin level. His fire release, genjutsu, and ninja tool precision especially stand out. Combat awareness is sharp, with analytical and observational skills bordering on frightening. He wields a two-tomo Sharingan, proof of his overwhelming potential. Limitations. Only 8 years old. His body remains underdeveloped. Stamina, explosive strength, and sustained combat power are a far cry from that of adult shinobi. While his chakra reserves outstrip those of his peers, they're still insufficient for long, drawn-out fights on the chunin level. Real battlefield experience remains thin, particularly against high-pressure, multi-layered combat scenarios. Positioning. Cannot serve as the main attacker or centerpiece in extended battles. More suited as a tactical core and support unit, leveraging his Sharingan's insight, genjutsu, precision tools, and decisive fire release strikes. His role should be to create openings and control the flow of combat from mid-range. Absolutely avoid prolonged close-quarters combat that demands relentless taijutsu or extreme chakra consumption. Mitarashi Anko. Advantages. A textbook elite chunin. Strong taijutsu fundamentals. Balanced in speed, strength, and agility. Wide-ranging ninjutsu repertoire, particularly fire release, earth release, and the hidden shadow snake hands techniques. High poison resistance from long-term venom exposure. Endurance and willpower that had always bordered on unyielding. Considerable real-world combat experience. Limitations. Current state or Okaimaru's defection left her mentally scarred. The trauma has plunged her into despondency, leaving her unstable and sluggish in battle. Her combat will is low, reflexes dulled, her overall effectiveness laced with uncertainty. Positioning. By rights, she should be the frontline spearhead, a primary attacker tearing open enemy defenses with her taijutsu ninjutsu combination. But her present psychological state complicates matters. Temporary strategy. Until her condition is confirmed, She should not shoulder the heaviest close combat pressure. Better to deploy her on flanking maneuvers, second wave assaults, or as mid-range disruption, using ninjutsu and serpent techniques to inject chaos and spread damage without forcing her to carry the front line immediately. Roshi's pen lingered on Anko's name, leaving behind a heavy blot of ink. No matter how cleanly the analysis looked on paper, it remained a theory. The lively, battle-tested kunoichi described in her file clashed violently with the dispirited woman he had seen firsthand. Did her taijutsu still bite with the same ferocity? Could her snake-style ninjutsu still flow freely? Would her instincts hold firm in the face of real danger? These were unanswered questions. It was, in truth, a non-standard team riddled with flaws. Itachi's brilliance shackled by his youth. Anko's blade dulled by trauma. Tactics, trust, combat readiness, all of it had to be built not from paper theories, but from reality. With a sharp stroke, Roshi wrote a single line beneath his notes. Primary action, internal squad sparring assessment. Only in live combat could he test the steel of the blade, and see whether the hand gripping it was steady. Far away, the Hokuto's office was steeped in quiet smoke. Hiruzen Sarutobi leaned back in his chair, listening as the masked Anbu knelt before him. The silver-haired shinobi removed his mask, revealing a tired, half-lidded eye. Despite his casual expression, Kakashi Hate's tone was measured and precise. Target individual, Roshi. Special Jonin, ninjutsu specialist. Promotion assessment completed. Hiruzen nodded for him to continue. In terms of combat performance, Kakashi reported evenly, each word crisp. His battlefield literacy qualifies as high level. And for his age, mastering 5 chakra nature transformations is nothing short of genius. Hiruzen's reply was a soft, unreadable hum, the smoke of his pipe curling slowly toward the ceiling. Core assessment, chakra control and endurance. Kakashi's voice was steady as he laid out the key point. During the trial, he executed no fewer than 6 different elemental techniques, including a wind-fire combination to counter deep forest emergence. Despite fluctuations in his aura, there were no clear signs of depletion, and his concentration remained sharp throughout. His chakra reserves far exceed that of an ordinary jonin. He paused briefly, then added, almost reluctantly, "He surpasses me." Hiruzen Sarutobi closed his eyes, smoke curling from his pipe. Kakashi's chakra was considerable in its own right. Even with the constant drain of the Sharingan, his strength still outstripped that of most jonin. Roshi's background and years of records flashed through the Hokuto's mind. In the past, he hadn't reached such a level. The issue wasn't the number of techniques, it was the sheer difficulty of transforming and molding different chakra natures in rapid succession. The strain was far greater than repeatedly shaping a single element. Yet Hiruzen pressed no further. His tone was slow, thoughtful. 5 nature transformations. How was his application? Proficient. Kakashi's reply was crisp. Basic techniques, water wall, great breakthrough, earth flow, were deployed with precise timing and smooth transitions. His wind-fire combination displayed excellent control over both chakra nature and shape transformations, producing considerable explosive force. His choices emphasized practicality and battlefield adaptability, with no noticeable weaknesses. Taijutsu, adaptability. His foundation is solid. Movement and evasion are efficient, seamlessly coordinated with ninjutsu use or disengagement. His battlefield awareness is exceptional. Under ambush or heavy suppression, his judgment stays calm, his decisions decisive, and he consistently finds optimal or fallback solutions under pressure. Kakashi's eye flickered with memory, the image of Roshi bursting through a corridor of flame. Overall, his ninjutsu mastery and practical application not only meet, but exceed, the standard for special jonin. The qualification is deserved. The office grew quiet, broken only by the faint crackle of burning tobacco. Hiruzen's gaze grew distant, clouded. How did he respond to Tenzo's wood release? Kakashi thought back. His first responses were conventional ninjutsu, executed swiftly. When confronted with deep forest emergence, he chose a high-risk, high-reward wind-fire combination to break through. He didn't attempt to counter with any secret techniques. More importantly, throughout the entire engagement, he revealed no trace of would release himself. He hesitated, then added, his composure was excellent, but the instant deep forest emergence activated, his chakra flow stagnated for a heartbeat. He recognized it. His decision to push through aggressively was tactically sound, but it may also suggest a deliberate choice to avoid exposure or comparison. Hiruzen's brows lowered slightly at that. Kakashi's final words cut through the smoke. Even silence in the face of would release is a statement in itself. The Hokage grunted, gave no further comment, and dismissed him with a wave. Kakashi replaced his mask and slipped into the office's shadows, vanishing as if he had never been there. Left alone, Hiruzen's gaze turned toward the deepening twilight beyond the window, the glow of the setting sun blurring through the drifting smoke.
And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously love it if you guys could leave a like on the video, as it genuinely helps out so much, and it keeps me going, plus it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. See you in the next one.